Okay, good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody. It's Thursday, April 4th. It's 7:31 p.m. I'd like to welcome you to the Board of Finance's regularly scheduled meeting. First item on the agenda is public comment. If there's anyone that would like to speak at public comment, just come up, and if you would either before or after, just sign your name there. Hi, Jill.
I might have run up the stairs, sorry. Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for giving me a minute to talk to you all, particularly in light of the long evening that you had to have ahead of you. I'm here just to continue the conversation. I think that one of the things I'm hearing from my board is, why don't they see what we see? And I think and suspect one of the things you all are thinking is, why does the Board of Ed see what we see? So I just want to keep the dialogue going. I think there's room probably for some of the things that I'm about to say, for us to say these things earlier, not in the 11th hour. But here we are in the 11th hour. So as you know, our BOE budget was $121 million, of 6.48%, and your guidance was 4%, which would be about $120 million. To get down to that, it would be $2.8 million. We do value investment in schools, but also in other town assets. We like sidewalks for our students to walk safely to school. We like parks and beach for our families to recreate in. And we realize that the Board of Selectmen carry the debt service for extensive renovations and builds to school buildings at over $160 million. So with that in mind, I still want to add some additional context to the comments I made on March 5th. As I noted, and you all have subsequently discussed, that while our enrollment is flat, our per pupil expenditure is up. Over the past couple of years, the BOE has increased the services it delivers to students in several key areas. Recently, we've added mental health support, deployed school security officers, and increased our special education services. Prior to that, we increased psychologists, and following COVID, academic interventionists. Most of these increases to services were FTE neutral changes. However, in fiscal year 25, our special education spend is up $2.5 million. It represents 2.23 percentage points of the total 6.48% increase. To put that in context, over the previous 4 years, special education spending grew 8.64%, or an average of 2.88%. This is less than the average per year overall budget growth of 3.44. In contrast, the growth in this category from fiscal year 24 to 25 is 8.8%. It's almost the same as the total growth over the previous 4 years, and that 8.8% includes savings from the transportation initiative. The budget would be 4.25% without these additional expenditures. Additionally, this year, the district was not able to have a rate cap on health insurance, which means we have a 13.85 increase in premiums compared to last year's increase of 7%. Had we had the same 7% premium increase, the budget would be $680,000 less, or 0.59% less. Together, these two factors grew the BOE's budget from a 3.66% increase within Board of Finance guidelines to 6.48%. As a result, to realize a budget reduction of $2.8 million, we are concerned that the available funds that we have to adjust the budget would impact student educational experience in a way that we think is not desirable, that doesn't necessarily match the town's desire to invest in education. You guys have tough decisions to make. Nobody's pretending you don't. Just wanted to put some additional contextual information out there for you as you move into your decisions, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jill. How are you?
My name is Cameron Sokolik. I live at 25 Bittersweet Lane. I'm here tonight to ask the Board of Finance to please vote to pass the Board of Education's proposed budget. My husband and I are parents to 3 boys in the Darien schools, but I'm here tonight as more than a parent. I'm here as a property owner with concerns about how a cut to the Board of Education's budget will impact my property values and the appeal of this town. The schools in Darien are our most important asset. To underfund them is not only a serious detriment to our students, but to the homeowners and voting members of Darien. Mr. Palin's comments at a previous BOE meeting about maintaining the quality of education while maintaining efficiencies over the past 20 years got me thinking. I was in high school 20-ish years ago, 22 to be exact, and date myself. And I was in a public school district very similar to Darien, and I can tell you that it was a vastly different world. We still had chalkboards and overhead projectors. There was no central air, nor the added utility costs it incurs. We had a computer lab, but not personal computers or tablets of any kind. We didn't have anywhere near the technology that we have today, nor the added cost and staff that it requires. Mental health, student wellness, DEI, those were not topics of conversation because their weight was not fully understood. Nor was there social media and the additional strains this causes for students. The special education system and diagnostics were a shell of the current system. I was in high school when Columbine occurred, but the schools had not yet responded with security and all of the measures that we have today. I could go on, but the point is that to look at the world of education over the past 20 years and only account for inflation would be missing the mark entirely. The things I had in school 20 years ago cost significantly more now, as do the many things I didn't. And all the efficiencies there are can't account for these ever-increasing demands. The bottom line is that Darien needs to keep up with these demands and costs or get left behind. New Canaan's Board of Finance recently approved a BOE budget increase of over 6%. I just learned that Westport approved a BOE budget of over 8% increase. New Canaan was faced with similar increases in teacher salaries and healthcare, and they still chose to add teachers and enhance the quality of their education. In light of that, and their Board of Finance agreed. If New Canaan and other neighboring towns are recognizing the value of this investment and Darien is not, that should be a serious concern to everyone in this town, with or without children in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind, just jot your name down, or if Taylor didn't get it. Folks, anyone else?
Joanna Walsh, 17 Pleasant Street. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of myself. I wanted to talk tonight about this idea that there's room in the budget to cut things and not have it touch the student experience. $2.8 million is a very large number. The Board of Education heard a lot of public comment, made a lot of their own commentary, debated, and came to the conclusion that this budget, as it currently stands, is what is absolutely needed to meet the needs of each and every student in the district. Cutting anything now, and even recommending that the BOE go back to the add cut list, is moving backwards. This budget already saw the loss of several things that many parents would argue will hurt students. Perhaps you think that there's much room in the budget because the district has returned, not including in 2020, a total of $4.1 million to the town since the fiscal year 14. I heard Dan the other night say that the BOE is causing the town to overtax residents because the BOE returns a surplus to the town every year. But I disagree with that. The Board of Education has actually been budgeting extremely well because you've not taken into account excess cost reimbursement. When the budget is set, no one knows how much money the state will grant Darien. But every year for the past 10 years, the amount of money granted by the state has made the budget whole. In fact, Darien has been so conservative in its estimation of what it costs yearly to give students everything they need, they've had leftover state money. So the residents haven't been overtaxed at all. Those surpluses are purely UCR funds. As I see it, the general fund has $4 million plus in it that was initially directed to be used on students with special needs. To keep that money in the general fund and then ask the district to cut an additional $2.8 million from the budget will be looked back upon as a lack of foresight or consideration of long-term consequences, focusing too narrowly on immediate gains or savings while ignoring larger, more significant costs and risks. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make public comment? Well, I appreciate our three speakers. We'll all reflect on that, and I think if we have any sort of responses, or we'll certainly take that into consideration as we debate here over the next few days. And thank you for your input. And certainly we encourage any others that have comment to please come forward. So that's it on public comment. We're going to move to, most of this meeting is going to be dedicated, just for those in the audience, to the town side of the budget. This is the second half. And we'll pick up sort of the budget as a whole next week, Tuesday when we vote. So the first item here that we're going to run through is we touched on some of this at our last Tuesday's meeting, is going to be on Parks and Rec capital. Dan?
Okay, so John, if you have anything to add, please do. And David and I spent some time with Jim Coughlin yesterday at Weed Beach, but we talked about a number of things. So a couple things. First of all, to revisit some of the items that we did discuss on Tuesday. First, we examined the Weed Beach Gatehouse. I had queried whether this could be deferred, whether it could be just painted. After examining it, not just externally, but internally, and meeting with Jim and hearing how this has rusted, and it's already been supported once from underneath, and it will continue to wear, and we examined it a little bit more closely. I am now supportive of spending the $50,000 to replace the Weed Beach Gatehouse. Notwithstanding that, I think there is a discussion about whether we can use readers and replace the personnel, but one of Jim's points was, even when you have a parking garage that has, whether it's an easy pass, there's always somebody in the booth, because sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes the gate doesn't open and doesn't let you out or let you in. So there's likely to be some level of redundancy, even if we were to enhance that technology. So that individual still would need some kind of shelter. So I think maybe it's for a later day as to look at that technology, but I think the wear and tear on the gatehouse, and B, the likelihood that we'd probably need it at least for some extended period of time led me to be supportive of this expenditure. Another question that I had was whether we should defer stripping and repainting one of the paddle courts down at Weed Beach. Last year we did one. There are 5. There's a 6th one being built. This would be the second in a series of 5 strip and repaint. These paddle courts are over 30 years old, and basically every time they wear, you're just painting over paint. So while it may not be obvious to the naked eye that it needs done, apparently if you play there, it is apparent that it needs done. And so the notion of just painting over paint year after year after year doesn't seem like it makes too much sense. So the installers recommend that after 30 years, you embark upon a series of strip down to the aluminum and repaint. And so for that reason, I'm now supportive of this expenditure. I had asked, with respect to the $11,000 to replace the Baker Park fence, whether the new playground that is earmarked for that park would involve dismantling of the fence, and whether we should therefore defer that. And I was assured by the Parks and Rec Department that it would not, that the repairing the fence would have no bearing on, or installing the playground would have no bearing on whether to repair that fence. So I'm supportive of the $11,000 to repair or replace the portion of the fence that requires replacing. There was $9,000 to repair the Cherry Lawn Rock Foundation in the parking lot. It is clearly in disrepair. The stairs are actually okay, but there's kind of an overhang from the foundation that kind of impedes access up the stairs if you're not careful. So the question is, do you need to spend all $9,600 or $8,600, excuse me, or could you spend a little bit less than that? I don't know, David, do you have an opinion on that? I'm kind of I could go either way, honestly. And it's not a lot of dollars really it's not really gonna make a big difference in the budget overall, but.
It's not a lot of dollars overall. What I would say is this: if we think that there is going to be a sort of a use evaluation of Cherry Lawn Park, and the way that it's used or the parking is configured or those types of things may change. It's really what I saw could probably be cleaned up by a park and rec crew in one day's worth of work, in terms of making sure that the stones don't impede upon the stairs to walk down, and clean up that bit of debris that had tumbled over towards the street.
So we saw a quote that was split 2,600 for the stairs and 6,000 for the embankment.
Yeah.
So maybe the thing to do here is to reduce this from 8,600 to more like 2,500 or 2,750, to either use the contractor that they went out to bid for, to bid on, or have someone in the town to do it. And that would cover that expense.
Sure.
So that would be our proposal then, to reduce it to, say, 2,750.
Yep, that works.
Let's see, we also don't believe, given we are in the midst of turning over our Parks and Rec director, that a traffic study makes sense right now. And not to get into the Board of Selectmen's business, but my understanding from people on the RTM, on the Parks and Rec committee, is that it's really more of a utilization study that's required over there, rather than just counting the cars that come in and come out. So I would recommend deferring this until we identify a Parks and Rec director and make sure that whatever we're doing there is consistent with his or her vision for that park. The last thing that we discussed the other night was the Nature Center driveway, $275,000 to repave the Nature Center driveway, the parking lot, and there's some curbing that's required. I've been over there twice, and I believe, especially considering what we just talked about on having a new director come in and maybe thinking about the utilization of that park, and maybe traffic is redirected in some way, that we should patch and repair the curbing rather than repave the entire driveway and parking lot. I don't know what that, it's not $275,000, maybe it's $75,000 to do that. Maybe by Tuesday, we could have an estimate on that as to if we were to patch it and repair the curbing, what that would do. And I'd be all for that, but I think it would be, we could defer the paving until we're sure that that road and that parking lot are going to remain where they are in purpose for how they're currently purposed, which I think is likely, but I think we could wait a year. And what I saw on the driveway and most of the parking lot is that it's fine. It's not in such state of disrepair that it needs repaving right away. The other thing I'm reminded by our public works director is if we're going to repair the curb, there's some milling that needs to be done on the driveway that abuts that curb. So that needs to be funded as well. That's it for the things we discussed the other night. There were 4 items that I had neglected, and so I can cover those unless there's any further discussion on the items we just went through.
I would just make a comment on the Weed Beach, on replacing that. There's all this discussion going around about usage at Cherry Lawn and whether or not, if there's too much usage, should it be residents only? We need to replace something at Weed Beach. This is this gate hut is obviously getting old. There's going to be something done at Great Island and so forth. My concern is not that using some type of technology doesn't completely eliminate the need for it, but the question is however that technology works, is it a sort of overhang that you drive underneath? How does that technology work? How do they read it? What do we need? If we go and my concern is just, and it's not that much money, right, all in, but in terms of process, we should be thinking about if there are any changes that need to be made, what would they entail? Because I'd hate to plop down a new gatehouse and then somebody come in and say, well, this is how we're reading license plates and so forth now, and instead you need a canopy, you need this, you need to, and then we've just built a brand new gatehouse. So I'd rather think about it holistically. If they do that, whether the new director looks at it and then we've discovered what the technology is and they come back and they say, there's nothing else to do, we need this. I mean, it's small enough capital that we could always appropriate out of the capital reserve. But my view is like these projects, given where our budgets are, right? And how, I mean, every dollar I think that we spend, we need to think about not just those dollars, but all the dollars that are trailing behind it that are gonna come down. And so that's why I'd like to see some more real research on what technology can we do where we could possibly eliminate the need to have somebody there full-time. You know, how can we integrate that with what we might do in other parks? And then, so I just don't like simply replacing what we have and not thinking about how we could do it better.
Well, I would suggest then let's put this on the potential list, and we can make a determination on Tuesday as to what, and I don't know if we're going to learn much, we're not going to learn much more before Tuesday, but we'll all have an opportunity to think about how important this is versus deferring it. I don't know of any, though, initiative to do what you're suggesting. So this would be kind of a brand new initiative, and I would think it would have to, it couldn't start before a new director is identified and brought on board, and that individual's given some time to kind of consider all of this. So we're looking at months away from making that determination. And then doing a special appropriation then, if we agree that this would be necessary.
A quick question, is there any danger the building will fall down?
I'm not an engineer.
Did you hit on it?
The building,
That risk was not identified.
the building is steel construction. The primary issue seemed to be that the floor had been rusting and had been welded several times. And because the rust is coming from the bottom, they had to go in, you know, and put additional supports under the flooring. When you walked on the flooring, you could actually feel it give in certain spots where obviously it's not supposed to give because they were right in front of the door. So, you know, that was more of the issue. Will it fall down in the next calendar year? I would guess no.
If it didn't yesterday, probably not.
Well, I'm sympathetic.
But the other thing that Jim said is that at Pear Tree, an employee had stepped through the floor and fortunately wasn't injured, but could have been injured. And so that was something that obviously they would like to prevent from happening.
Well, I'm no engineer or carpenter either, but can somebody throw some half-inch plywood on the floor and at least buttress it? But the one other thing I would add, Jim, is that I'm very sympathetic to your thoughts about the fact that a whole lot is changing in this town in terms of the way the cherry lawn will be treated, and weed and pear tree and Great Island. And with this new director coming in, it seems to me to make sense to let him get his feet on the ground and then begin to think about this, as you say, good word, holistically.
Listen, my personal opinion, could we live with it for another year, assuming that we are confident that it's safe? Yes. It's not falling down, it's not coming apart. So we could live with it another year. I don't know that I'd recommend living it, but we certainly could.
Well, these dollars, if I'm correct, Jen, wouldn't be available until July 1.
Correct.
Right? So no work could actually, and if we're just buying a new unit, it needs to be bid out and so forth. So there's time, I think, between now and July 1. I just feel like there's a lot of moving pieces going around as it relates to access to parks. And do we need to think about, I just hate spending money if we may have to kind of redo it or undo it.
So the next item is 5,000 small capital. I don't think we need to discuss that. There's $6,000 to replace small AEDs, automated external defibrillators, supportive of that. There's $16,500 to add a third stand-on blower, which would reduce labor costs. I haven't seen an analysis of that, but intuitively it makes sense. You're going to free employees up to spend time elsewhere if they're on a stand-on blower instead of using rakes or some other, or actually it's the on the back blowers, so they'd be more efficient.
That's the thing that I struggle with this. This is, strikes me as, the comments in the write-up are, work more efficiently and faster, but there's not really any explanation as to how the savings would accrue. And if you look at the overtime line for the Park and Rec maintenance crew, the overtime line doesn't decline. So it doesn't flow through to any material savings that I could discern in this particular calendar year, where we are, strained. I think this falls into the nice to need category, nice to have category, not the need to have category.
So we can put that on the to be discussed. And then the last item is a $120,000 to replace an old dump truck with a new 550 hook truck. And I honestly don't have a lot more information on this project than just that.
Is the money based on a bid, or is it a place setter?
I don't have that. So I had thought I had sent some questions, but they were in my draft email file, so I guess I never set send on that. So I'll send that, Jen, and then maybe we could revisit these items on Tuesday. So I'm all for, replacing outdated equipment, but only if it's outdated. And then the other I'll send you the email with the questions. It's do we have how old is the existing truck? What's the salvage value of that existing truck? Can it be repurposed elsewhere in the town, et cetera? That's it on Parks and Rec capital.
Okay. Or Ed or John, anything we discuss on Parks and Rec that you guys have questions on or that you think we may have missed?
I have some comments at the end. Go ahead.
Okay, so next area is, that was sort of a revisit of last Tuesday, is going to be Public Works.
Okay, we worked with Mark Adeletta and his team from the RTM. Ed was very good to answer the questions that we sent in. Thank you very much for that. Everybody knows that Public Works basically does everything that keeps the town running, right? From public buildings to roads to doing all the engineering for all of the projects that occur in town, keeping the sewers operating, and managing the parking operations for the town-owned lots. This year, the sum of the operating could pretty much be summed up with one category, which is the waste management area. Well, let me just give you a quick overview. In aggregate, across all of the operating categories, the total operating expenses are expected to rise 8.8%. That is predominantly due to costs affiliated with the waste management contract, or the costs that we expect to occur at the transfer station. Offsetting that, there have been proposals to increase pricing for tipping fees to compensate for that. So basically, on a net cost basis, revenues minus expenses, the Public Works Department is minus 1% in this proposed budget year. But sort of digging into the details, we have a contract with Win Waste to manage the transfer station for us. That contract is up at the end of the month of June. Ed's been in negotiations for some time now. The budget was built based on Win Waste's initial proposal. So you can call it the worst-case scenario expectation. There's been some back and forth, and we are hopeful that they will end somewhere in the middle, representing some savings, but it's too early to make any changes to the numbers at this point in time. The current contract with Wind Waste, let's see, and from our questions, we believe that new contract should be finalized June 1, right? So let's see what else do I have here. So the cost for solid waste disposal is projected to be up 33% to $1.5 million. Part of that, one of the principal areas that is affected there is the recycling business. In the recycling business, the town had been receiving $7.50 per ton. But in the current proposal, at least the initial volley, the proposal was that we pay $75 a ton. So to offset that, there have been some recycling tipping fees that have been proposed. Previously, make sure I get this right, Ed, that we did not, currently we were not charging for tipping recycling. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So the combination of what Wind Waste wants to charge us, plus the recycling tipping fees, there's also a recycling rebate based on clean paper prices. Darien-Ann's recycling is considered to be high quality, so we've been averaging somewhere, I think if I got it right, between $35 and $45, $35 and $55, so call it $45 on average. So the combination of the tipping fees, the rebate, should get us to effectively cost neutral on that business. One of the important things, if you've been down to the waste to transfer station anytime recently, you know that the compactor is not working and has not been working for some time. Wind Waste is responsible for that, but they've been holding off doing anything until they know for sure that they have a contract, because they certainly don't want to spend money on the capital if they're not going to be the operator going forward. The rest of the components of the operating budget for waste for Public Works, honestly, they fall into the as expected categories. There's nothing really unusual or important that we have to talk about there. Anybody have any questions before I move to capital?
There's just one question on the revenue. If you looked at just the tipping fees versus what we're paying, I think you suggested that's a net gain.
The total revenue, including the rebate, I think is it break even or is it a slight positive?
It's pretty close to break even. Yeah, I think that was a recommendation from the board, selecting to up my recommendation from $58 a ton to $75 a ton for tipping of recycling, at least. And that kind of got us close to a break even point.
Okay.
And given that that's a big driver of like of the Public Works budget and so forth, is there any risk in that in terms of those rates not going through, or those rates causing people to bring stuff to different towns?
When you say rate not going through, not approved?
I mean, has it been formally approved yet?
It has not, and won't be until the budget is approved. But I believe since the Board of Selectmen made that recommendation, there's a pretty good chance that they will approve it. I don't want to speak for them, but that was the gut feeling I got.
Is there a process that we need to go through in terms of public hearing, or is you all can just set it and it's done?
I believe it is because it's built into the budget. When the RTM approves the budget using that rate, that becomes the official rate.
I don't think there's a hearing that's required for that. It's just the budget process. I'll recheck that, but I don't think.
I mean, because it's a big savings, or big offset, I should say, to our cost. And just want to make sure that's we can count on
But
that
that's
100%.
similar to all fees. So the Board of Selectmen has the fees, with the exception of P and Z, because that has to be written in ordinance. Since that's what the Board of Selectmen base their budget on, when the Board of Finance and then the RTM approve it, it's with those fees that they had set their budget.
No, that's right.
Okay. Thanks, Jack.
Okay, then let's just go ahead and move to capital. The first item is $400,000 to replace a front-end loader. Oh, no, that got moved to ARPA, sorry. So the first item for us would be $165,000 for new sidewalks. And these sidewalks are basically filling in gaps where certain sidewalks end, and they're focused on areas that, to promote pedestrian traffic and improve safety. And if I have this right, you mentioned Tokenique, Sedgwick, and Old Kings Highway South. Right. So those would be the three areas. So for $165,000, I would be supportive of this item. There's another item that was pulled by the Board of Selectmen, which is $500,000 for sidewalk refurbishment. Public Works has a reserve already that has sufficient cash to cover it for this year. The following year, of course, we'll have to replenish, but we can deal with that next year. The single biggest item is $1,377,000 for town paving. That would encompass paving 6 miles of roadway. Ed has a plan to pave so many miles of roadway every year. The only other item that is in here, there are 81 miles of roadway, for those of you that haven't driven them all. So he plans to repave them on a 20-year schedule. And the only other item that would fall under the town paving per se is the paving of the Heights Road parking lot at the train station there by the depot, because now that the drainage project is complete, that parking lot is in need of repaving. There's also $90,000 to resurface the post 53 lot, which needs repaving. And once that's done, my understanding is that we will begin the project to put the pedestrian walkway down to the train station on that side to make it safer for folks that park up in that lot. There's $7,500 to repair the town hall gym floor. Sorry, that item was moved to ARPA again.
No, that one was not.
That was not?
No.
Oh, so I made a mistake. No. Okay, so it's not moved to ARPA, but it's to repair areas in the town hall gym floor. It's to treat the worn areas and address the safety issues that those worn areas represent, and it will extend the life of the floor. So I would be supportive of that. There's $5,000 for tree replacement, which is designed to replace trees removed or lost due to storm damage. And the locations for that are determined by resident request, or when DPW crews make recommendations. As with other departments, there's $5,000 for small capital, which doesn't warrant discussion. And there is $50,000 for the Old Kings Highway design and repair, bridge repair. And Ed's going to have to explain this because I don't know what the initials or the abbreviation stands for. It's installation of scour protection for the bridge abutment. I interpreted that to mean putting in something that keeps anything from rubbing the abutments, which would subsequently cause them to degrade in strength and quality. Is that right?
And prevent the scour from underneath the footings that are there.
From underneath the footings that are there. Interestingly enough, this work was actually identified in the CT-DOT bridge inspection report as something that we should consider. In order to come up with this pricing, they used unit prices from previous projects and from conversations with the consultant and contractor recent prices. So I'm supportive of all of those items that are on the DPW capital budget.
David, two questions. On the post 53 lot, that is not part of the property that we lease from the state?
It is not. I asked that question.
And so does it basically stop where you cut in 95 access?
I believe it stops right as you go down that hill and you hit that bottom lot. I believe it stops right at the edge of that bottom lot. That's where the fence used to be to separate the two. That's the demarcation line.
So do we own that entire upper lot? Or just when you,
Defining upper.
The post 53 lot.
post 53 lot to the,
From where the two driveways come into the parking area, post 53 will be to your right. The rest of the parking and the ramp going down towards Hollow Tree will be to your left. Right at that island is the demarcation for the property. That's why we're able to put in that sidewalk.
and that sidewalk that's going to go in, because that's part of the state-owned land, are we able to fund that from the parking fund, capital fund?
Yes,
That's why we don't see that.
that's correct.
And in terms on the other side of the tracks, up across from Post, is that work's also covered from the parking fund?
Parking fund, that's
Capital
correct.
fund, okay.
We took out the sidewalk rehab. Why?
Because we have appropriated bond funds that are not yet spent.
Okay.
Do you want me, do we need to talk about the parking fund or the sewer fund?
I mean, those balances have generally continued, and they're all self-funding.
Yes.
Or actually, they're all funded by sort of user fees, parking permits, tickets, I think, other stuff. So and we generally have run surpluses in there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no general property tax dollars that go into either of those funds.
Okay, anything else on public works? Okay, next item is police.
Sorry, Captain, usually I like to meet with you, and Chief, couldn't do it this year, so apologies. So my comments are going to be actually off of what you and Chief Anderson had talked to the Board of Selectmen originally. Some of this stuff may be outdated, so correct me if any of this is wrong.
Do you want me to move up, or am I good?
Sure, if you'd like to, sure.
That'd be good, thank you.
The big item for police in terms of the increase, so we're looking at a 5.75 increase, is adding a 53rd police officer to the force. Tell me if I'm wrong on some of this stuff. Once again, it's probably 6 weeks old. So I think we're at 51 still. Is that correct?
We are, well,
Presently.
no. Well, yes, right now, but we're in the process of hiring to fill the chief's spot, which
Right.
would be 52. And we have somebody going to the academy for that. They're weeks away from being hired.
Okay, so they'd be 52.
Yes.
And then the 53rd that's in the budget that we're looking for would be a January 25 start? Is that the thought?
Yes.
Okay. So the thought behind the 53rd is actually the way Chief described it, is to provide some nimbleness to the force, right? And he had talked about a little bit of narcotic investigation there, and some traffic administration. So it sounds like it's a kind of a combination of a bunch of things.
Right.
You know, I was kind of struck by all the items that we talked about, the 75 to 100 FOIA requests that happened each year. I was struck really by the number of calls to the assisted living center.
Yes. Right.
944.
We're first responders, so
Yeah.
most of those are medical calls, and typically we
Right.
send 2 officers to medical calls.
So do you see, so in the 6 weeks that I kind of saw the presentation, anything changed in terms of the need for the new person still on target? Like,
Yes.
is there anything that has changed anything along the way?
I would just
But-
say, the only thing that's changed that we've seen rise is the call to the new, I would say, the establishment on Heights Road. We're seeing a lot of calls there, aideds mostly as well.
Mostly
And miscellaneous calls, but
at the Heights?
yes, at that new residential area
And what's
there.
I'm sorry, what kind of calls?
Medical,
Oh,
yes. There's some
Interesting.
medicals and miscellaneous, domestics, anything where you have residents, typical calls, but yeah, we are seeing a good amount at that location
location.
already, yes.
And can I touch on civil dispatch for a while? Because
Sure.
I think I've been on the board long enough where I think the first one was asked for, as I look at Jack, I don't know, how many years ago, maybe 10. Are we fully staffed? Are we at 8 and, are we at 9 now? Or
We
'cause I know that you
we
guys-
are in the process of hiring our 9th, yes. We've sent out the conditional offer.
Awesome.
Yes. Yes, finally.
And it's been, has that been a little bit of what I see kind of addition? You add some people, you get to 9 or 8, and then you lose some people?
Yes.
And
I
then-
wouldn't be surprised once we get to full staff if we lose 1 or 2, maybe. I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm hoping that doesn't happen.
Right. Let's hope not. Because it sounds like you guys put a lot of work in terms of
We do, and-
training and,
Yes, and same as our officers, if we don't see that they are performing up to standard, we are not afraid to cut them loose. We don't want a body sitting in a chair. We want somebody who knows what they're doing and who's good at it.
Right.
So we don't settle for anything less than very good.
and the folks that are becoming civil dispatch, is it still kind of driven by geography, meaning you're getting, I'll say local folks, right? Anybody past, like, call it 25 miles out or whatever it is, tend not to apply for the position?
We have an issue recruiting people because of the distance, yes. A lot of people that are interested don't apply because of the commute issues and the traffic, so.
Right. And can you remind me and maybe the board of the coverage area for the civil dispatch? Now that we'll be at 9, is it 24/7? Like, can you give us an idea on that?
Yes, so there'll be 2 dispatchers every shift. So 2 at 7 to 3, 2 at 3 to 11, 2 at 11 to 7.
And
overnight.
we're counting all the calls that are coming in, right? And maybe it's in the metrics, and I missed it. One of the things I'd love to see, because it came up so often, is can you put how many FOIA requests you get a year?
Sure.
I was kind of struck that it seems to be coming from, how do I want to put this, outside groups that are asking
Yes,
for
there are
FOIA,
many, yes.
as opposed to potentially, call it in-town folks.
It's a lot of legal, we get a lot of legal FOIA requests, but then we get,
Right.
I would say, businesses requesting information. Yes.
And can you
Or-
go-
Or media requests.
Request. Yeah, I remember, it was either last year or 2 years ago, there was a highly publicized issue, and you guys had to do 38 FOIA requests?
Yes, all
And you
separate.
couldn't do a general one, right? Each one
Right.
wanted a separate one, which I thought was harsh. Just to remind the board, and I think I say this number all the time, but the city of Los Angeles has 200 people that do full-time review of body cameras, all the incidents that happen for FOIA requests. They have 200 full-time people that sit there doing it. I actually didn't have anything else. That was kind of my, I want the board to kind of chip in, because I know the Board of Selectmen had a bunch of questions for it, but I kind of want to open this up to the group.
Sure.
Because I'm in favor of it. Once again, I'll go back to the tape a little bit. In 1980, we had 50 police officers in the town. In 87, we had 51. So in 35 years, 37 years for that matter, we've added 2. And I know for a number of years, like I've been on it, Dan was a colleague of mine for a number of years. We were at 47, 46, 48, could never seem to get to the full optimization, if you want to call it that. So it finally sounds like, unless I'm wrong in this, we're getting to that number. Through all the mandated reporting that's coming from the states, the accreditation I think you talked about in the last time with the Board of Selectmen. So I find that to get to that number is, I think, is correct, and I'm supportive of it, but I'd love to open this up to the board for their questions.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
In the discussions, there are the increased calls, first responders to the nursing homes or to the new project over here, right? And there's some additional investigative work, but a large portion of it seems to be administrative in nature, whether it be FOIA compliance with the new state policing law or other administrative duties. If I forced you to give me a split, what's the split of the time requirement? Is it 50/50? Is it 70/30?
Of administrative duties
How much
versus
administrative
policing.
versus sworn officer
Right.
duties?
I would say administrative, 30, 35, policing, 65, 70.
Okay.
Right.
So even if we can hire an administrator for less than a sworn officer, I guess I was looking at it from the lens of, if I can hire an administrator for less than a sworn officer, then to get all the administrative duties done, I'm reducing my cost per unit of output, right? And then those officers don't do administrative stuff, they actually do sworn officer duty stuff.
Yes.
But it sounds like that won't affect, that wouldn't be, it wouldn't work in this situation. is what I'm
I don't think so, and I've actually looked into that a bit, maybe an accreditation manager type position. And for what they're going in this area, I mean, across the country, they're about 86,000 for full-time. In this area, it's anywhere between 73 and 105. If you look online right now, state police is asking 131 for an accreditation manager. Our town is obviously smaller than state police, but I would assume because of the area we are, it'd be closer to 100. And that person is now just limited to accreditation, whereas an officer, like the current workflow now, we have, there's now with our IT professional, he actually is helping with our FOIA requests, which takes the burden off of me, where I can do my job a little bit better because he's taking a lot of those off my hands, which is very nice. But when you hire an accreditation manager, it's literally just for that, versus when you hire an officer, you can put them in different job functions. You can have them in traffic, you can pull them and work narcotics, you can have them work on the road if we're short that day on the road, so you can move them around where you don't really have that option if you hire a civil accreditation manager.
And was this budget built to, in one of the comments or in the goals and objectives for the police department was to operate the Marine Division 7 days a week? Was this budget built including 7 days a week of operation
Yes.
for Marine?
So we have been operating the Marine Division 7 days a week for the last 20 years. That's the way it's been. I think in retired Chief Anderson's time,
Yep.
it was only on the weekends, but for the last 20 years, it has been Monday through, every day.
So there's no effective change in costs relative to the way that portion of the policing is being run?
Right.
Okay. Here's the other area I struggled with just a little bit, to be quite frank. We have a new officer in there for 6 months out of the year, which is roughly $65,000. And we have patrol overtime rising 12%, which is another $63,000. So I'm sort of struggling in my mind to reconcile a 12% rise in patrol OT when we're already adding a whole nother body.
Right. The problem we're having, why we have so much overtime lately, is injured on duty. You have military leave. You have,
I
Yeah,
remember
we
you
ha- we
talking
have-
about, you have
we
like
have
several
four
officers.
4 officers now that are military, they're still active, and we didn't have that in the past.
Right.
So that's,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
that's 2 weeks a year and then 1 weekend every month. So that is raising our costs in overtime, unfortunately. Sick time, holiday, the same old stuff we've always had, but now this is an additional. And then the FMLA, because we do, have more people wanting to use FMLA for family-related issues.
Yep. Just out of curiosity, because you sparked a question, what happens if one of those officers that has the military obligation gets called up to active duty?
They go.
They go, but you can't replace them?
No, we have to keep their
We have to keep
position
their
open.
position
Yes,
open.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And David brings up a good point, just on cost, you going back on the administrative side, you touched on it a bit, but fully loaded, first year patrolman, 131,000.
That's with benefits?
With benefits all in.
Yeah, but I'm assuming the benefit amounts would be roughly equivalent, right? So if we're looking for the hiring point for the administrator, probably the salary for the officer, salary to salary is probably the right comp, because you're going to have to provide benefits to the administrator too.
Right.
So salary-wise, I think, was it 78-ish, something like that? So, yeah, so I don't, it doesn't sound like there's really much savings there after all.
So I have some concerns about adding this 53rd officer, and for a few reasons. The first is, when we added the 9 civilian dispatch positions, one of the things we were advised at the time is that that would free up 2 uniforms to do narcotics and traffic. Yet still part of the rationale for adding this officer is narcotics and traffic. So I'm not sure.
Yes, I can explain if you.
Okay, so
Sure.
I've got a few more points, but go
Yep.
ahead.
So since we've been adding, this has taken probably 10 years now that we're trying to get to full staff in our dispatch area. In that 10 years, we've added 2 SROs that pulled from us, our patrol, right? We have the Marine Division that pulls from our patrol. We have our traffic unit that pulled from our patrol. We actually are still short in traffic. We used to have 2, now we have 1. We're down a detective in our detective bureau. So those 2 officers that were pulled for the SRO program, they have never been replaced. And so we're still missing those 2 officers.
If we're down a detective and we're down a traffic officer, but we're up in complement, because we were at 47, 48, and now we're at 52.
Right, so the other part of that is our contract. So we have a minimum we have to have on the road, which means road, in patrol, wherever they are, they have to be present. And that's 6, no matter what. On days that we're fully staffed, it could be up to 8. But typically, when you're up to 8 or 9 officers, those officers are allowed to take time off until it gets to that 6-man minimum. No matter if they're on the street or in dispatch, it doesn't matter. There's always a minimum of 6.
Okay.
And that has changed over the years as well.
Has that gone up?
The number, no, it's gone down.
I have 2 more points. The first is that we've added SSOs to the schools. So I would imagine that would lighten the burden on the police department with respect to the schools. And then the last point I make, and this is a mixed message, because first of all, thank you for what I'm about to say, but burglary investigations are at a 5-year low, fiscal 24 projected. Let's see, motor vehicle burglary investigations are at their lowest, second lowest in 5 years. Robbery investigations, 1, projected for this year. Motor vehicle theft cases are at a 5-year low. Criminal sex assault cases are 0. So, first of all, again, thank you, because we have a very safe community, as these numbers support. But the case for a new officer, that we've had all this growth and we've got all this development, we still don't have rising crime. So,
I would like to say that's a good.
That is a very good
part on
thing.
our- that we are
That's why I said
deterring-
thank you, and it's a very good thing.
We are
But
deterring
it-
criminals.
But the question is, does it support?
Right.
We don't have a rising crime issue, therefore we need more law enforcement. We may need law enforcement, but it's not because of rising crime. It's not necessarily because of rising population or further development. There may be other reasons for it, and there are a number of reasons in the proposal. But again, because the police department and the community at large has done such a great job of managing the safety of the community, that doesn't lead to, in my mind, a need to be adding a 53rd uniformed officer. So
Okay.
I'll stop there.
Okay, I have prepared something, if you wouldn't mind me reading, it may answer some of the questions instead of, I feel being put on the spot. I can't get to the exact topic, but I would love to read something I've prepared if you don't mind. Okay, so thank you for allowing me to be here. Over the past year, the town approved an addition of 1 officer, bringing our count to 52. However, in the light of significant developments and evolving demands of our town, I strongly advocate for the addition of another officer. The rationale behind this is population growth. Over the last 4 decades, Darien has experienced a 15% increase in population as per the United States Census data. The expansion in housing units and residential complexes, notably Avalon, Kensett, and others, underscores the need for proportional growth in our police force to maintain effective law enforcement and community safety. Changing demands. The expectation and demands placed on law enforcement have evolved exponentially over the years, necessitating a proactive response from our department. Increased statutory mandates, reporting requirements, and administrative obligations demand adequate staffing to ensure compliance and effective service delivery. Assisted living complexes. The emergence of assisted living complexes in our town requires heightened police presence and response. Calls for service at these locations have surged, indicating the necessity for additional personnel to address security concerns and provide assistance to vulnerable residents. Specialized divisions. Several divisions within our department, including traffic, detective, and marine, operate as suboptimal staffing levels. Enhanced staffing would enable these divisions to fulfill their roles more efficiently, addressing traffic concerns, investigating crimes, and ensuring marine safety during the boating season. Narcotics enforcement. The addition of a narcotics officer to the detective division has long been a priority. Adequate staffing levels are essential to allocate resources effectively and combat drug-related offenses, safeguarding our community from illicit activities. Administrative obligations. Increasing administrative requirements, including those mandated by the Police Accountability Bill, necessitate additional personnel to ensure compliance and maintain accreditation status. Fulfilling Freedom of Information Act requests, particularly concerning body and dashcam footage, requires meticulous attention to detail and substantial manpower. Resource allocation. There's a strain placed on our officers due to unfilled positions and mandatory overtime. Adequate staffing not only improves officer well-being, but also ensures efficient service delivery without overburdening our dedicated personnel. Until recently, the department only increased the number of sworn personnel over the past 40 years. Norwalk has added 4, Fairfield 4, Wilton 1, New Canaan 3, and Bethel 5 in the last 5 years. Officers were called in for forced overtime 400 times from July 1st, 2023 to March 24th of 24 due to officers out on injury, sick time, vacation, military leave, and FMLA. 5 months of the year, 2 officers pulled from patrol to work on the Marine Division and are the only first responders in Darien waters. Our traffic unit was reinstated, which pulled 1 officer from patrol. We used to have 2 officers in this assignment full-time. The time to complete mandatory paperwork with arrests has doubled, leaving officers inside and off the road if they make any arrests for the remainder of their shift. Even simple accident reports have doubled in length in the past few years. When we started our school resource program, 2 officers were pulled from patrol, 1 for the high school and 1 for the middle school. Neither were replaced. Our detective bureau has been running 1 officer short since we made that 2nd resource officer at the middle school. In conclusion, the addition of an extra officer to our police force is not merely a luxury, but a strategic imperative to safeguard the well-being and security for our community. By investing in additional personnel, we demonstrate our commitment to maintain Darien as a safe, thriving, and vibrant coastal town. I urge the Board of Finance to consider this proposal seriously and prioritize the enhancement of our police force for the betterment of all residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Question on overtime.
Sure.
So the budget assumes we're adding a 53rd officer, and yet it still has $60,000 of overtime in it, right? Is that for 60,000 increase?
So-
$60,000 increase in overtime. The aggregate number is higher than that, and I could tell you that on the patrol overtime, the aggregate number is $597.
If we did not add the 53rd officer, what do you think, how much more overtime do you think we would need to incur? Or
So
budget for,
the,
if any?
right, so the overtime numbers we used have been based on historical data. The number we had originally proposed, I believe, was cut back a little bit, probably due to the 53rd officer. I do believe that we may not hit that amount proposed. If we do have this 53rd officer, it would fill, vacancies. I can't promise you, but I would hope that that happens.
Okay.
yes.
Quick question, are juvenile carjackings included in your crime statistics?
They are. I don't believe we had a carjacking. No.
No.
We've had cars broken into.
Broken
We've had
into
cars
and stolen, right.
But that's not a carjacking.
No.
Captain, you used the word
God, no.
forced overtime. Would you describe exactly what that is?
Sure. So there's overtime where it is sent out and somebody can voluntarily take that.
Okay.
If nobody wants it or is available to take it, then someone is forced to stay from a
Okay.
previous shift or a shift ahead of
A non-coming
their-
shift.
Right.
Do you know how many sworn officers there are in New Canaan?
Sworn, I don't know the number off the top of my head. I believe they're a little lower than we are, maybe just slightly under us.
I see, I was trying to think of like, citizens divided by officers, right? To
Right.
get that number, find some metric to compare similar community, right? Because New Canaan is a similar aggregate population size to us.
Jim, I just wanted to provide.
Texas, can you just hold on just one second, just let us finish up first? One question I have, as I think about sort of the staffing and moving to 50 to 53, and this budget only has us being there for the half of the year, so some of the overtime, what you're assuming for the first half versus the back half, but it seems like consistently inside this budget, I know we have a sort of we have to fill minimum staffing requirements,
Right.
we have to deal with military leave, we have to deal with, this budget includes 2 full-time SROs at each of the middle and high school. Have we looked at how they actually all come together in terms of, on a weekly or monthly basis, how many active officers of those 53 do we actually have available? Like what percentage of the time are the 53 available? If you say that the 2 SROs, I think, Jen and the chief ran some numbers, I think it's like 65% of their salary or time is dedicated to their SRO role during the season, and they're doing stuff otherwise. Is the combination of family leave, sick leave, military leave, and 2 full-time SROs and our contract, our minimum staffing level, how many is that actually leaving available at any given time? Like even like right now, how many are out on military leave? You have 2 as SROs. I'm just trying to figure out how many were actually.
Right. I mean, currently, day-to-day sick, who knows? We have, I believe, 2 out on injured on duty right now. 1, I believe, just came back from FMLA. So I think the majority of people are back now. We are short a couple.
Yeah, I don't need like the
And,
answer right
well,
now.
I'll give you another example of like an overtime that we can't plan for. So the storm last night, that hit us like out of nowhere. And we had to hold 2 people over, mandatory, to help the shift. There were 6 officers, but that wasn't enough. We had trees falling on cars with people trapped in them. We had wires down, electricity, trees blocking roadways, medical calls in the middle of this. And so our minimum of 6 that were there, I can look up how many actually were working, it may have even been more, but then we still had to hire extra people back for the emergency. So those things are unforeseen that we can't, and that's why I get nervous to say we don't need the overtime. Like we budget all our overtime training, everything is budgeted that we know we are having, but there's unforeseen issues that we face all the time that we cannot, plan for necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
That's the overtime issue, but
maybe this is
same
for
with
next.
injured.
Yeah.
One of our officers been out since they saved the woman from the river with a neck injury because they jumped in and were dragging him back, unfortunately. Another one has a back issue that you can't rush.
I think we see the overtime, and again, maybe this is for next year, right? I think the police department's going to be here next year as well, right? But I think it'd be helpful as we think through sort of overtime, if we had an ability to say, and you may track this already, but this was our average sort of available officers. This many out of the 53 for 8 months tour with the schools. For, on average, this much of the time, they're either on military leave, however long it is, a couple weeks per year, plus every other weekend. If we had some notion of how many of the 53 are we actually pulling from, on average, that are available to fit into the minimum squad, I think that would be, overtime is so large, right? It's publicized and so forth, right? I think it would give us more insight in terms of why that overtime exists if we knew of the 53 soon to be, we were only averaging on like 46, sort of available to be called.
And can I make another request?
Sure.
In this disclosure at the back of your summary package, you mentioned specifically the other types of calls that you go on and the number and volume of other types of calls. If you could develop some metric, whether it be, number of nursing home calls per week or per month, or, number, like whatever the right metric, however you all would evaluate how busy your officers are, right, in terms of how often do they have to respond? Because if the average nursing home call is 25 or 30 minutes, right, then an officer is out of rotation for 25 or 30 minutes during that call, right? So that would give people some sense of a broader range of things that you all do for the town, because I think Dan's point is right. You all have done such a good job that looking at the traditional crime stats doesn't really show how much service you're providing for the town.
Sure.
So any other, whatever you all think is the right metric to sort of show that level of service that's being provided, I think it would help the case going forward the next time you need another officer.
Sure.
And so in terms of tracking like availability of the staff, one other thing I would ask you to maybe take a look at is, particularly as it's growing, New Canaan sort of does this, right? They sort of look at all the, in terms of us understanding where we're spending our dollars, they look at certain town departments, including police, and they say how much of that budget is actually for the schools. So we have 2 officers who 60 or 70% of their time is working for the schools, but it's in this budget. We have, I think it's like 9 or 10 crossing guards who, and I think there it's predominantly the school, although sometimes they help me cross the road to the train station. But I'd love to see some type of allocation of how much built into your budget is actually part of the schools.
I believe we did that for traffic agents a year or 2 ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we did that kind of as a baseline, kind of an initial exercise. I think with last year's budget, Kate had asked all of the departments, because a lot of the departments do things in kind for the Board of Ed. And she had asked for estimates, so we can probably update that.
Yeah,
That'd be good to know generally.
Yeah.
Across the town, not just police. Right.
And listen, there are services that flow the other way, like technology and so forth, but I know,
Well, we pay for that.
I know we pay for it. But the other thing that they, I lost my train of thought, but I think just seeing what those expenses are and how they flow would be helpful.
What impact has the addition of Great Island to the town's property, public property, had on you guys?
We are patrolling that as well.
Is it a significant impact to the obligations of the force, or?
At this point, I wouldn't say too significant. I mean, we do make pass-throughs, during the shift often, just to show a presence. But I would say it's within our patrol duties,
Captain, 2 other things for me. One's an observation, one's a request, a little bit of information. At one point, we used to get civil dispatch numbers. What kind of call they were. Can we get back to doing that?
Well, I don't know exactly. Can you explain that a little
Yeah,
bit more?
so on the civil dispatch, they used to log the number of calls, time of day they came in, what type of call they were.
Oh, sure.
Do you remember these? Does anybody on the board remember, like that civil dispatch report? I thought it was I think it'd be interesting to see how many, for some reason, off the top of my head, 5,000 one year was a number. I think I maybe overestimating that, but I love, kind of once we're doing data requests, I'd like to see, like,
Sure.
it's definitely out there. I may have an old one if you need one, but I'd love to get a rotation on that.
Sure.
And just back to the assisted living, there is 2 patrolmen that show up for each incident, right? Or is that,
Most of it depends on the type of call. More serious medical calls, we send 2. If it's somebody that, like, needs a transport and there's no medical issue, we still send someone just for a transport. And that would be, the nursing home calls and said, we want to send this person to the hospital, they're not feeling well. Where there's no, emergency, the more serious calls we send to.
Okay.
Before you move on to capital, I withdraw my concern about the 53rd officer. You made a convincing case.
Yeah. I think
Can I just
to go-
deal with some operating issues that you guys have been talking about? before we go to capital?
Is this related to
Yes, it's
something that we're
related
going
to two. First of all, in response, just a point of clarification. The SSOs do not affect the SROs because the SSOs are solely in the elementary schools, where the SROs are in the middle school and the high school. So it's almost like 2 different areas, and that's always been the fact that the SROs are police officers and they report to the police department, not to the Board of Education. The second thing is, while you're talking about overtime, and this is part of the new legislation that went in, all of our officers are required to receive training. And if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me, a lot of the training is done on overtime. So they're brought in on a Saturday, everybody has their training. So when you're looking at overtime, please understand, part of that is nothing more than required training that's mandated by the state for our officers to have, and maybe that's worthwhile to split that part out from the other operational overtime.
Good point. On the SROs, I think everybody's clear. 2 SROs and all of the crossing guards in the police budget, the rest is all.
Yeah, but the question was, is that the SROs did not believe any responsibility? The answer is no.
Okay. So maybe as we move into fire, I'll,
Capital? You have
Oh, sorry.
capital on, please?
yes.
Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to point out. Do you want to call it up, or I can just
Yeah, I
kind
got
of...
it for you.
For the group.
Can you read that?
No.
I'm 59 years old, don't be doing
Is that a
that
joke?
to me.
Just because you can't doesn't mean we can't.
I'm going to look at the closer
I got a
one.
nice monitor.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna look this way, just for the hell of it. On vehicle replacement, that's 6 new cars. On average, I think, Captain, tell me if I'm wrong, they go about 2 years for most
Yes.
weeks. So that's why you guys see the leap of about $142,000 there. The other thing I wanted to point out, the 9/11 recording system.
Yes.
It's got a cost of 26, that's been reduced.
That has been reduced,
To
yes.
16
We
plus,
have
right?
updated
16,000?
an updated quote that we can upgrade our system versus having to get a new one.
Replacement.
Right.
And there's one other thing that I think is going to be in front of us, it's going to be in front of the Board of Selectmen on Monday, is license plate reader. I didn't see a cost on that. Did it?
Oh, okay. I actually have something for that, if you'd like to listen.
Because I think, unless I'm wrong,
Yeah.
that's going to be, we're going to try to put that in this budget
Right.
too.
I would
Okay.
like to add that to the budget.
What, do you have a cost on it?
47,300.
Can you give the?
Or can you explain what that
Yes,
is?
I would love to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, guys, just to make sure, the Board of Selectmen hasn't really officially
No,
sort of
they
taken this
haven't.
up yet. Yes,
That's what I was
they do.
saying. It's
Yeah.
going in front of the Board of Selectmen on Monday, so potentially we're voting Tuesday, so.
Okay. So I'm here to respectfully request an amendment to the budget in the amount of $47,300 to allocate funds for the implementation of license plate readers within our town. I'm going to refer to them as LPR, it's just easier. So an LPR is a device that automatically scans and captures images of license plates on vehicles. These systems typically consist of high-speed cameras mounted on police cars or fixed locations. LPRs have become widely adopted by police departments throughout the United States and considered best practice for several reasons. One is automated vehicle identification. LPRs can automatically scan license plates of passing vehicles, allowing police to quickly identify vehicles of interest, such as stolen cars or vehicles involved in Amber Alerts. crime prevention and detection. By scanning license plates in real time, LPRs can help police detect suspicious vehicles linked to criminal activities such as stolen vehicles, burglary, or other offenses. The technology enables law enforcement to be proactive in preventing crimes. Improved officer safety. LPRs can alert officers if a scanned vehicle is associated with a dangerous suspect or a vehicle connected to a violent crime. This information helps law enforcement approach situations with appropriate caution, enhancing officer safety. Assistance in investigations. LPR data can serve as valuable evidence in criminal investigations. By tracking the movements of vehicles linked to suspects or criminal activities, police can establish timelines, identify patterns, and gather crucial information to solve cases. For instance, we recently tracked a vehicle after a serious car accident that happened on the Post Road by Old Kings Highway South. 2 people in the vehicle were seriously injured, and there was another car that was going at the same speed. It looked like they were together. This vehicle was involved in baiting officers into pursuits within Darien and Stamford, has engaged in pursuits with motor vehicles, and actually has fought with police in Stamford. He was part of the case was ours. He had baited our officers and had pursuits with our officers in the past. And coupled with Stamford's case, we linked them together due to license plate readers. And he ended up being held on an over $2 million bond because of that. And we wouldn't have found out who this gentleman was unless we used, in this case, we used Stanford's LPRs to track the vehicle based on our officers observing that vehicle and the license plate at similar events. So that was one that it worked out for us. Another point, traffic enforcement. LPRs can aid in traffic enforcement by identifying vehicles with expired reg, suspended license, or outstanding warrants. Community safety, by effectively tracking and apprehending criminals, LPRs contribute to overall community safety. Residents feel more secure knowing that law enforcement is equipped with tools to swiftly respond to criminal activity and apprehend offenders. Interagency cooperation. LPR systems can be integrated with databases shared among multiple law enforcement agencies, facilitating collaboration and information sharing across jurisdictions. This enhances the effectiveness of regional crime fighting efforts. Crime mapping and analysis. LPR data can be analyzed to identify crime hotspots, patterns of criminal activity, and trends in vehicle-related crime. The safety and security of our community are paramount concerns for all of us. License plate readers have proven to be an effective tool in aiding law enforcement agencies in various aspects of public safety, including crime prevention and investigations. By capturing license plate data, these readers can help track stolen cars, identify vehicles associated with criminal activity, and assist in locating missing persons. They are force multipliers when it comes to police work. They will capture the rear license plate of a vehicle and distribute objective evidence only to those officers that are allowed access to the system, typically supervisors or detectives. LPRs provide indiscriminate evidence from fixed locations with 24/7 coverage and real-time alerts. LPRs run license plates to gather facts about the vehicle, alert police of any wanted vehicles, and aids in solving crimes. LPR cameras offer advanced surveillance capabilities and complement our current technology infrastructure. The cameras we're looking into integrate seamlessly with our current software of Axon body cams and our storage software evidence.com technology, allowing for efficient coordination and management of law enforcement activities. This unique integration enables officers to swiftly download pertinent data points such as images and seamlessly link them to their preferred evidence repository system, whether it's evidence.com or Axon's platform. This streamlined process ensures a tracked chain of custody for all images intended for investigations, enhancing data management and empowering officers to effectively leverage visual evidence to enhance their investigation. One advantage is the compatibility with surrounding police departments who also use Axon and evidence.com. This interoperability enhances our ability to collaborate with neighboring law enforcement agencies and sharing information. It's worth noting that many neighboring towns and cities within Connecticut have already adopted this technology, and by aligning with these municipalities can establish a network of interconnected surveillance systems. Darien is one of the few towns in Fairfield County that does not have LPRs at this time. And just to give you a background of what we've done recently with LPRs from other towns. Our PD alone in 2023 utilized LPRs in 10 cases to identify suspect vehicle, confirm the location of a suspect, or determine where the suspect vehicle traveled before or after a crime, and link those to our investigations. We've also had a case where we saw a suspicious couple at a USPS, and we captured their license plate, and later learned that they stole a victim's wallet at a store and used their money at an ATM. By using LPRs in Stamford, they were captured near a bank where money was taken out, and we made arrest warrants for those subjects. Our PD also used for lead generation. So, for instance, one of our detectives got a shoplifting case at a CVS for a few $100s worth of hair products. The store provided us a license plate for the car, and Real-Time Crime in New York ran the tag through their LPR system, and they were able to confirm the vehicle and that it traveled into Connecticut the date and time of the theft. And we were able to get the LPR of where the vehicle is frequently parked in New York, so we will be applying for a warrant for that. Last year, as Stanford used their LPRs in aiding them in 69 investigations. And just to explain, for instance, New Canaan has this LPR system. We went up to look at their cameras, and they had just installed it, and literally a month later found the offender of a hit and run in the center of town. They had time and a vehicle description, and they ran it through the LPR system and found the offender and arrested them on the hit and run. So those are just a few examples. I hope that explains. If you have any questions, feel free.
Two quick things for me, sorry, and can we get a copy? I'm sure if it's going to the Board of Selectmen.
You want a copy of?
Yeah, I'd love to see that. And second, because I know John's going to ask this on Monday, but do we know how many, so you talked about jurisdictions, a lot in Fairfield. So is it possible to find out of the 169 town/jurisdictions in the state, how many are using them?
That would be hard to come up with a number. I have.
But most of Fairfield County, you're saying?
Yes.
So are we the outlier in not having it then? Okay.
I mean, I can tell, off the top of my head, I know Stanford has it, Norwalk is in the same position we are, they're about to be funded for it. New Canaan has it, Westport has it, Wilton, I believe, has it. So all surrounding towns, even New York into like Port Chester and.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right now, it's just, you write it down? Or does someone take a picture of it, or how is a license plate captured now?
Right, so if you're lucky, a citizen might capture, that's how a witness, if we happen to get on scene and we can see it, but yeah, that's usually witness.
Got it.
Or if we can find usually cameras outside businesses, it's hard to pick up a license plate, especially if they're moving. But sometimes we can, if it's parked or moving slowly near a business, we might be able to pick one up.
So in terms of just focusing on the financial side, because I know the Board of Selectmen is going to they're the ones that make the policy decision whether or not to do this. How does the contract work? What's the total dollar amount that you'd be asking for? If you could just remind us what that.
Sure. So it's a 5-year contract. It's lease-based, so every year. This year, let me pull up the quote. It goes down.
We lease the equipment, or we pay for the service, or both?
Both. So you're leasing the equipment and the service comes with that. So this year, because we have to install them, it's a little bit higher. So this year it'll be 47.3, but the annual recurring is 39.5. And
That's
there's,
fixed, it doesn't go up over the 5 years?
no, does not.
And so the 47.3, if this was appropriated, Jen, would this fall underneath an operating budget? Or
Yes.
does- Okay.
Because it's a lease.
So these dollars would not be available until July 1. Does that fit in terms of, from a timing perspective, any discounts and so forth that?
Yes. As
any
long as,
commissioners might be wrestling with people for?
yes, they're okay with that.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so it's a 5-year lease, and I assume it's sort of able to be terminated at any time, just given, can we enter into multi-year leases, or just given the single-year appropriation?
We usually, we can always run it by Wayne, but usually there's a non-appropriation clause. So if
Okay.
funds are not appropriated in a future year, there's how you terminate.
Okay.
Just on the vehicle replacement, Rob, is there something unusual, or is this, I don't remember hearing kind of the backup behind the $350,000 of vehicle replacement. Do you want to talk about that, or?
I thought roughly these cars about 60 grand.
So the problem is the cost of vehicles have gone up significantly since the last time. For instance, this year, Ford didn't even open up they didn't even bid on us because they couldn't get the cars. So we had to go out of state to find them this time, and they were more expensive. And based on that number, I had to use that because I don't have any numbers besides what we've paid for them this year. They can't even give me a cost because they can't get a hold of any. So the cost of the vehicles have gone up. So have the parts, unfortunately. And it happens to be a year where we also, besides just our patrol cars, we have to replace an admin car and the supervisor car. So it
those
just
cars-
happens to fall into that rotation. That's why this year looks a little higher than the
Okay.
other years.
And then what happens to the vehicles that are replaced? Do
So.
we repurpose those within the town to the degree they can be repurposed and still have a useful
Yes,
life?
so we give first offer to the town. They come over and assess what vehicles they want or need, and they take those, and then we trade in the ones if they don't need them.
So has the value of either the vehicles being repurposed to the town or the trade-in value been reflected in the budget, or is it just a capital outlay? at this
The
point?
trade-in, no, we budget for the full acquisition cost, just in the event we don't get them on trade. For the repurposing, it kind of lags, so with the police just having received some new vehicles in the last few months, we were able to repurpose one of those to the building department, which allowed us to remove their vehicle request out of the
Right.
25 budget.
Okay. And so kind of like next year, we might be able to do the same thing?
Right.
Right.
Got it, okay, thank you. All right.
Any other questions on police? Is there anything to remind our residents about the amount of money we would save if people lock their cars every night, all the time?
Lock your cars all the time, please.
And remove the value.
Lock your homes.
And remove the
Everywhere.
value.
Take the
Every
keys
time.
out of the
Yes.
vehicles.
Yeah,
Yes.
don't hide them in the car.
Yes.
And don't leave your iPad there.
Don't hang them up inside the, leave your house. I'm not.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next is going to be fire and emergency services here.
How do you want to do this, David? Do you want to do fire departments then? How do you want to do it?
However you want, man. I'm good. I can go first if you want.
Go ahead.
All right, so we split this up between John, Dan, and myself. I have the responsibility for the three fire departments. The good news is I will tell you that our town administrator was very good at trying to get numbers to be similar in terms of the growth rates across different line items and the different departments. The highest growth rate in town for operating expenses was the Darien Fire Department, but the aggregate dollar amount is still relatively low compared to other departments in town. That's only a $7,000 increase to their $188,000 budget. The single largest increase, or the largest increases in that budget were training was increased by $1,200 to $5,000. That for the Darien Fire Department, that was specifically for some specialized training around vehicle stabilization, like if they respond to something on I-95 and there's a tractor trailer turned over, partially turned over, or whatever. There's specialized training that they needed for that. The other two areas, which are recurring across the other departments, are equipment repair and maintenance and facilities repair and maintenance, and each of those increased around 7%. So that would be that department. Next up on the schedule for operating budget is the Norotan Fire Department, which is projected to rise 3.95%, so 1 basis point lower than the Darien Fire Department. That total dollar increase is $8,431. So their total budget, operating budget, is $221,811. Again, equipment and facilities repair were two of the largest items at 7% and 8% respectively. And there was a request for additional replacement of turnout gear. Apparently turnout gear is supposed to be replaced every 10 years. So they replace a certain number of units of turnout gear every calendar year. Lastly, Norotan Heights Fire Department, their budget is expected to decrease only 1.8%, but it is the highest total budget at $235,000 already. They also have the facilities repair and maintenance up 7%. There's also an increase in the heating fuel projection for Norotan Heights, but the increase only brought them to in line with the dollar amount that they spent in 2023, so it seems reasonable. And their request for turnout gear replacement was flat, no increase in that line item. So that sort of runs you quickly through all of the operating budgets. I think the real story for the fire departments is probably capital. So unless somebody has any questions on the operating side, are we ready to move to capital?
Yeah, no other questions. I guess just one thing on the operating side.
Yep.
Are a lot of their utilities still coming to you all, and you
Yes.
all are processing, paying them?
Yes.
Okay, so on the Darien Fire Department, they had a total request for $103,000 in capital items. The single largest item was to replace the heating and piping in the building. So this would be a request to replace the heating system because they said that the existing units are near the end of their useful life and the cost of repairs is becoming prohibitive at this point in time. They explored multiple options, but they felt that replacing would be the best option. The new system would be more efficient, obviously, than the older system and provide for a more efficient, more consistent heating, cooling within the building. The next item is $10,000 for thermal imaging cameras. This seems totally important to me, which is it identifies heat signatures, whether it be, a latent fire that's within an existing wall or identifying a body at a particular scene when it's pitch black out. So the $10,000 would cover 3 cameras and 3 chargers. They're also looking to replace truck nozzles on engine 41. The existing nozzles are over 10 years old and purportedly past their useful life. They're choosing the same nozzles that they currently use for engine 42 to facilitate, ease of use and training on only one type of equipment. And for this particular item, they have bids from suppliers for the truck nozzles. They'd also like to replace some of the hoses on the trucks. The initial request here was for $40,000, which I presume was to replace all the hoses on both of the trucks. But the town administrator cut it to $20,000 for the current year, so there will be $20,000 in the subsequent year. Apparently during the annual testing, some of the sections of the hosing have begun to fail. So this is a safety issue and preventative issue so that they don't lose water pressure in the event that they're responding to a fire. There was also a request for $15,000 in ventilation fans, but that was pushed to fiscal year '26. So any concerns or questions on Darien Fire Department capital? Okay. Norotan Fire Department capital is $155,500 was the total request. The largest item was $62,000 for an exhaust mitigation system. The prior year, we had approved $72,000 for a system at the Darien Fire Department. And this basically is a system that eliminates diesel exhaust from the building, since diesel exhaust has, proven carcinogens and other things like that. The existing system apparently is ineffective, doesn't work very well, and is in need of repair. So they received a bid from a vendor in 2023 for this system, and they have added an additional $10,000 to the bid they received in 2023 to reflect expected increase in price. There is the perennial always buying radios situation. There's $21,000 request for portable radios. They say that this is year 5 of a 5-year project to replace the radios at Norotan Fire Department, and they would replace 5 portable radios, with the idea being that it's a safety issue. They want to make sure that each firefighter at a live call scene has one in case of a need to call for distress. Lastly, this is the fire department that's converting to natural gas for their heating system within the facility. They currently have a diesel generator, which is estimated to be 50 years old, outside, and they had a diesel tank which was leaking and has now been replaced with a temporary diesel tank. So they're looking to get a new generator. There would be a whole building generator and will run off natural gas as well. So we would expect it would be more efficient and eliminate any environmental contamination issues that they have with the current diesel system. They are also requesting replacement of 3 radios and chargers, and have a quote from a town-approved vendor. Their total price is $13,500, which is roughly consistent with the. Nope, sorry, I skipped departments on you. The radio request is for Norotan Heights. So $72,000 is the last one for Norotan Fire Department. Any questions or concerns there?
What happens to the old radios? Because we're replacing radios every year. So I guess a question is, is there any resale value in the old radios? 'Cause
I didn't think to
there's
ask
gotta
that
be,
question.
there's either a big box of old ones, or are we able to sell them, or we're throwing them away?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I.
There's gotta be a lot over the last 5 years.
Yeah. And how long do they, can we find out how
25
long
years,
on
yeah.
average they last? To echo the gentleman,
Yeah,
you're right. It feels like every year we're
Somebody's buying radios every year. You
Well,
might
we
be
have
sure.
radios in many departments.
Yeah.
The fire departments are buying radios every year. I think.
Yes.
It seems like, I don't know,
Yeah.
you know, maybe we want to go back and check that, but.
No,
it-
but you're right.
It seems
Well,
like. it.
they all had a string, I think, like you said, DFD was on a 5-year replacement schedule, we're in year 5, and I think NFD was coming up to the end of their replacement cycle, and HFD has 1 more year, then they have a year off, then they start up again.
So if it's a 5-year replacement cycle, then, okay. Anyway, point made.
All right, so over at Norotan Heights Fire Department, the single largest the total comes to 180,500, so that's the highest of the 3 departments. There's 13,500 to replace 3 radios, which is roughly consistent with Norotan Fire price, and they got that price from a town-approved vendor. There is $60,000 for self-contained breathing apparatus, otherwise known as SCBA. They're trying to provide equipment. They obviously need to provide equipment for each firefighter. There's newer technology in the new replacement CBA. The face masks have a higher temperature rating, so they won't effectively melt in a high temperature situation. And this is apparently the last year of the replacement cycle or replacement project for the SCBA. And they have spoken with the dealer for pricing on that particular item. They are also requesting an exhaust mitigation system at $72,000, so slightly higher than the Norotan Fire Department. And the building at Norotan Heights Fire Department is bigger, so you can imagine that it probably needs a slightly larger system. And the $72,000 is consistent with what we paid at Darien Fire Department the prior year. It's the same problem that the other departments have. The system that they had in place isn't working efficiently. It doesn't effectively eliminate the gas from the building. And Norotan Heights Fire pointed out that doing things like opening the bay doors and exhaust fans doesn't comply with OSHA standards. So this would be something we need to do. Norotan Heights also would like to replace some hose, and similar to Norotan Fire Department, was it Norotan or was it, no, it was Darien Fire Department. Similar to Darien Fire Department, Kate cut their request from $60,000 to $30,000, so that the purchase would be phased in over a 2-year window, so there'll be a $30,000 amount for hose replacement in the following year. And both truck 20 and engine 23 have hoses from the early 2000s. So the hoses are going on 20 years old at this point. So again, it's an issue of ensuring that water pressure will be there when and if they need it. 2 items to note on Norotan Heights Fire Department. They have spent $36,500 on the design appropriation for the retaining wall. They have an estimated price of $1.5 million on the retaining wall, and the engineer's report, the estimates in the engineer's report have been reviewed by DPW. I still am not quite clear on exactly where or when we are going to see that final plan or request come to us, so that might be something we could ask for an update on from the fire department. If
The Norotan Heights Fire Department will be before you on Tuesday to ask for a transfer, because some of their design, soil testing and such went over, so you could probably ask them at that time for an update.
Okay.
Do you know how much that's going to be?
11,000.
And lastly, this is just a heads up. In their capital plan in fiscal year '27, there is an item listed as garage renovation and live-in facility. There are no details on the plan at this time. We asked for this separately. And The dollar amount that was put into the capital schedule was $3 million. So it'd be interested to see what that is, but if I understand it correctly, for none of the firehouses do we own the buildings. So that's certainly the case at Norton Heights Fire Department. That's been discussed before. We don't own the building, and we don't have currently a right of first refusal on the building. So certainly, I don't know that we would entertain something like this, but certainly before we want to make sure that we can control what happens to the building in the unlikely event that the fire department ceases to operate as a fire department. So that's just a heads up.
Anything?
So,
For the fire commission?
yeah, I guess the only thing I would say is just in terms of that we have 3 sort of fire trucks sort of out there, right, that we've approved so far.
Yeah.
A $2 million one, a $1 million one, and an $825,000, I think it is, fire truck. So those are already been pre-approved. I think all 3 of them have been approved for bonding, although we can always choose to fund them with cash. And I think, are you going to hit on the fire commission in terms of like the classroom?
Well, the classroom?
Yeah, go ahead.
No. I have, the fire commission budget is $286,000, which is up $26,000 and 9% year over year. $21,000 of that increase, virtually all of the increase, relates to a new state regulation. It was enacted in 2023 that requires the turnout gear to be decontaminated a minimum of 2 times a year. Practically would be after it was utilized, but it has to be done, whether it was utilized or not, 2 times a year. And this is outsourced. So the smoke and debris is removed from that. So while that equipment is being decontaminated, which takes generally a day, it's out of use. So the idea was, because of this regulation, it leads to a capital. So that's basically, in order to decontaminate that gear, you have to contract with a vendor and spend $20,000 to do it. That's a state regulation. Related to that is, while that turnout gear is out of service, they need to have backup turnout gear. And so originally it was proposed that there'd be 30 sets of backup gear, 10 sets per department. The Board of Selectmen cut that to 21 sets of turnout gear, 7 per department. And that $76,500 capital request, which was reduced from the town administrator's request of $106,500. So it seems like a prudent adjustment to the original proposal, but we can't have a fire department that has all its turnout gear being decontaminated and then it gets called to a scene and doesn't have anything. So the 10 was based on the number of firemen basically on average on a scene. So I'm not really quite sure, I didn't quite follow how you got to 7. I like the idea of like, maybe you can borrow it from a different department, but that's the proposal. That's it for the fire commission. Any questions? On the fire marshal budget is $566,000, up $16,000 or just 3% year over year. It's all salary increases, 3% in salary increases. In addition, hydrants and water mains. At the time the Board of Selectmen approved its budget, we did not have a revised estimate for the forward hydrant charges from Aquarian. We were charged based on the number of hydrants, so that we pay to have water available at a hydrant. So that so the budget was held flat year over year pending that information. Good news is, according to our finance director, the estimate came in and we can actually add about 60,000, reduce the expense by $60,000 based on the estimate from Aquarian, recognizing that that estimate covers 3 quarters or 9 months of our fiscal year. Revenue is projected down $30,000 by the Board of Selectmen, but that was also revised actually Instead of down 30,000, it'll go up 20. And that's just timing of Corbin coming online and being permitted, and therefore inspection fees. So there's just kind of a transfer from this fiscal year to next fiscal year, and when we would expect to see those inspection fees. So good news, on the expense line, there'll be 60,000 less expense on hydrants than in the Board of Selectmen budget, and there'll be 50,000 additional revenue from hydrants, from the inspection revenue than in the Board of Selectmen budget. And then the fire marshal has one capital item, which is a $17,000 refit of a pickup truck currently used by the deputy fire marshal. It's a 2016 vehicle. Currently, the weight is unevenly distributed, which adds a lot of wear and tear on the vehicle. This retrofit will more evenly distribute the weight through the bed and add an estimated 5 years to the useful life. So it seems like a smart thing to do.
So that one is actually funded through ARPA?
There you go.
So you guys already approved that one?
Even easier.
And then they do have a request to replace their inspection and incident reporting software for $20,000.
I don't see that. I don't know how I'm missing those capital items. Okay.
I've got a question about fire in general. Maybe David has the answer, or Jen. If the town doesn't own the fire departments, who owns the buildings and how's it administered?
The individual departments own their buildings.
What happens if they choose not to be a fire department any longer and they choose to sell the building? How are the proceeds distributed?
That is a very good question.
I don't think that's codified anywhere.
No.
It's similar to, I mean, the library, we make a
Or
$4
the
million
Rings-
grant.
or the Rings End
There's
Bridge.
no, I mean,
It may be a small risk, but it's a risk to the town nonetheless.
It's
Probably
just a curiosity
something
question.
that should probably be explored.
To Jen's point, there's another $20,000 in the fire marshal capital budget. It's to replace software, fire incident reporting software. It will no longer be supported after the end of this calendar year, and it's required. So it's to basically enter into an agreement with a new vendor. Now I'm done.
the only thing I'd say on the fire commission, I think there was talk of another capital project, I think at the dump at the training facility related to, they were going to use, I guess, one of the portables at, you tell me, Royal, and I guess that's.
No, they're gonna use portables from, from homes. And when they went down to inspect those portables from homes, they found out that they were not in condition to travel.
Right. So I think there's another capital project.
They have $120,000 funded through ARPA for the classroom.
Yeah.
And they have several projects funded through ARPA up there, and they've been struggling with how to phase them and stage them so that they're not undoing something they already did, because it's all working in the same area. So they have the drainage in progress. They're going to coordinate the paving with Ed when he paves up at the transfer station, and they're getting designs for the slab foundation work for the classroom. And then once they have that figured out, they'll be able to decide or determine what they can put on there as a structure.
I don't think it's a crazy large number. It's sort of a prefab, I think, metal building that they're looking at, but.
Right, but they already have $120,000 appropriated.
All yours, John.
And my two components of fire and emergency are the emergency management systems and emergency services. As in prior years, the town staffs its emergency response system with contracted paramedics to supplement Post 53's mission. In so doing, it guarantees Stamford EMS that they will be reimbursed for that that portion of their paramedical services EMS does not collect from insurance. The cost of the town has varied both up and down over the years based on the user's mix of medical coverage. If the guy on the gurney has Medicare, that's a different reimbursement rate than if he has personal insurance, and so on. Payment to EMS for fiscal '25 is budgeted slightly over $100,000, possibly giving rise to the question of whether the town should consider seeking reimbursement for users for the amount that the insurance doesn't cover. In sum, although up from fiscal '24 based on a 5-year average, budgeted total fiscal '25 EMS expenses remain surprisingly essentially flat at $172,000. They've been that way for years. Emergency services, almost unique for this budget season, the emergency services budget declined 15% from $298,000 to $258,000. Increases in contractual services include to maintain the town's radio systems will rise from $185,000 to $193,000, but are more than offset by compensation, which is expected to decline from $120,000 to $62,000. The fiscal '24 budget had assumed that a full-time emergency management director would be added in January of fiscal '24, which was but one of the many recommendations made by the Center for Public Safety Management's Emergency Service Analyst Report. That report covered the town's 3 volunteer fire departments, the Fire Marshal's Office, Emergency Management, and 911 dispatch services. The $120,000 budget for that year included 1.5 FTEs. However, the full-time emergency management director was never hired, and consideration of a directory EMD was blue penciled as well. Any gaps in coverage will be, according to Kate, delegated to volunteers. Accordingly, the fiscal '25 budget of $62,000 reflects just a 0.5% FTE, which virtually divides the existing assistant fire marshal in half, at least his time. As far as capital goes, there are no capital requirements for either emergency services or emergency management system for either fiscal '25 or, for that matter, '26.
Can we pause? So we just wrapped up kind of the expenditure side of our discussion on the town, right?
Yeah, absent the debt service, which is
Okay.
prescriptive.
Right. So, an observation is that we've struggled to identify any savings in the operating budgets. Maybe a little bit here. There's some revenue adjustments. There's some adjustments since the Board of Selectmen to today, but they're really just informed by you rather than imposed by us, right? And I think the reason is, and you said this a month ago or whenever it was, 55% of the increase year over year is in 3 items. It's pension, it's healthcare, and it's a solid waste fee that we pay to Stanford. And absent a material reduction in FTEs, there's really not a lot we can do about that unless we were to really examine, some kind of outside the box healthcare alternative. But we're not going to do that in the next 3 days. So if you were to take all that and set it aside and look at everything else is up 3.6%. Now, that doesn't, I haven't done the math, as maybe that's more like 4% with kind of standard increases in those other, if the other items were up more like 5% rather than 15 to 35%, you might get to a 4% year over year budget. But the reason the operating budget is up 8% is because of those 3 items. And there's nothing, frankly, that I don't think we can do to change those numbers. They are what they are. Anyway, as I'm reflecting on kind of our lack of ability to find savings here, I think it's because principally of those 3 items.
That's helpful.
Can we use unexpended ARPA money for any of the items?
At the moment, we do not have any unallocated ARPA funds. We have about $2,000 in the ARPA contingency. We just did a status update, requested a status update from the departments on all of their projects. So Kate has that in her hands now. She's combing through it. There may be some items, it's nothing that we'll be able to identify by Tuesday, but perhaps by RTM. If there's something that just looks like it's not moving forward quick enough for ARPA, or if it would make sense to, pull something out of capital in place of something that we have in ARPA. But at the moment, there's nothing available. I will say.
I made it clear as part of that process that we want all this stuff allocated with a clear vision to get that done. I don't want to lose any of these funds. And if in that status update we don't have that, yes, there will be reallocation. So we're not waiting.
The corollary to what I just said is that I think maybe this is the year we have to take a tougher perspective on capital. So we've identified a number of things that we're still kind of not entirely convinced on. So that's kind of what's left to impact the overall Board of Selectmen budget between operating and capital.
Well, and a lot of the capital things we're talking about are not things that we're eliminating. These are things that we're either asking you to think about in connection with a bigger project, or sort of push it off one more year.
Yeah. And I take your point that deferring capital, deferring maintenance is not a great idea, but on the margin, if we can, in a tough budget year, not that next year is going to be a non-tough budget year, but with these three major increases in the operating side, maybe it's not a bad time to consider it.
Well, I will sound the broken clock comment, which is I have been able to identify credit card fees in solid waste of $13,000, parking operations credit card fees of $8,000, and park and rec credit card fees of $40,000. So that's $61,000 in unreimbursed credit card fees that the town is absorbing. So we at the Board of Finance need to force their hand or simply request that Mr. Zagrodsky bring it as a priority item to reevaluate the credit card fee issue within the Board of Selectmen's budget for the coming year.
The only thing I would say about that is we've looked at this for a long time. There's a lot of ways to do this. I think if you go the route that we're going to say you can either pay by check or some non-credit card method, or you can pay the sticker price plus some fee, you get into forcing people to make different choices about how they pay for services. We're not equipped to really handle lots of things, particularly the stuff that kids use like Venmo and all that, where we need to update some of that. The other way to do it is to simply raise prices and say we're going to charge more, and embedded in that charge implicitly is coverage of these credit card fees, right? I mean, you could look at, another way to look at this is to say simply this is a cost of doing business and we've set our fees this way, and this is how much we net from the prices that we've imposed, and that's kind of an assessment of what the market could bear. Or you could just raise prices 5% or 8% or 20%, is you raise prices and make it simple.
Yep.
And we can do all those things. My general view is that rather than nitpicking about credit card fees, is just come in and look at pricing. And if you guys want to make more money by doing things, we can crank up parking stickers, dump stickers. We've got lots of things we can do to increase those prices. But in the end, it makes it more expensive for our citizens, and you just got to decide whether you want to do that. We can do it through taxes, we can do it through fees. There's lots of ways to do this. My only point is that there's just not this obvious solution to credit card fees. Lots of people handle it different ways.
No, I completely agree, but mathematically, the way it is now is if a citizen uses their credit card and there's a fee incurred by the town, and we don't either charge a higher price for that fee or pass through the...
we do it for big ticket stuff, so if you're going to
Right.
pay tens of thousands of dollars in taxes, or you got to pay those fees.
But nonetheless, the rest of the residents in town are subsidizing my right to buy my beach sticker with a credit card.
I think that some of the fees were raised with the intention of offsetting the credit card fees. I don't recall which ones, and it's been a while. But we can check back and see. I feel like the beach stickers were
beach were.
raised to cover that as well as the sales tax.
I prefer a price increase, because I don't know, I always find it irritating where you're like, you're gonna pay 3% more if you use a credit card. It's kind of just a little bit of like, I don't know, irritating when you encounter that with a retailer.
Dan,
So just
you're
raise
right
the
that
prices 3% period, and then you cover it.
Dan, you're right, except every,
Not to make this complicated, just raise prices 5%.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the same hand, and I think what Parks and Rec did with Active, where they, rather than having a per transaction fee, they sort of have a gross fee.
Yeah.
That's an exercise where we've actually reduced the cost of processing credit cards to our residents. So we should be looking at that uniformly across.
Well, we still have credit card processing fees for those transactions. We're just not paying the software maintenance portion through a per transaction fee.
But I'm saying, as an example, like figuring out, that was still more of a transaction-based software service, right? So it's whether you're processing the fee or you're processing the name onto the, the court or the class. If we can continue to drive down those fees, that's helpful, but it's hard to tell if is the beach sticker, are we really selling it for 51 and they're paying $1 credit card fee, so that's why we charge them 52? Or are they paying 52 and we're incurring a $1 credit card fee? It's not, I mean, I think you have to look at the overall pricing. If you want more pricing, increase and just raise the price of it.
I would suggest increase the pricing and and where we think we are giving up money because we're not passing on a credit card fee to the user, we should increase the price of that. And kind of that simple.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think we need to get that analytical or scientific about it. We should just increase prices where we think we can.
The issue here isn't just the transaction fee. The issue is how many different processors are we using? Because if we're not putting through steady volume, we could be paying a 3% interchange fee, but if you put all the town in one processor, maybe you end up at a 2.5 interchange fee. That's a much larger system, and you have to then coordinate your software to go there, and I don't know what the return on, but that's the real question here, is the different number of processors based upon the software applications that we're using and who we're putting it through.
But that's not something, we can't budget from the bench to go out and try to consolidate credit card processors and decrease, a 1/10 of a basis point on what they're charging us, right? And to your point, a lot of the credit card processing fees are baked in or intertwined with the actual software service, so it's hard to
disaggregate.
Right, but that's a longer term analysis and not something that's going to be solved this year and maybe even not next year, but that's what one has to look at.
No, that's why I agree with Dan. Like, if we're going to do this, there's really no reason to try to micromanage that process or disaggregate services from other costs, or try to just raise prices and forget about it. The only thing you have to do is promise that 2 years from now, when you see these same credit card fees, you need to remember that we increase prices to cover those fees.
And then track utilization to see if if we're overcharging and our activity levels went down as a result, right? Because it's not inelastic. Whether, programming fees, those kinds of things. So
in the scheme of things, there are other fish to fry.
Yeah, okay.
One item that I will have an update on Tuesday, we will have a slight decrease in our medical premium. We got a revised renewal estimate. We don't have anything written in hand yet. We're hoping to get that on Monday from the carrier, and then I'll recalculate. But along with recalculating the renewal rate, we've had 3 or 4 people come back onto our insurance in the last few months. They were opt-outs and now they're back on, so we'll recalculate it based on their actual coverage levels and see where we come out.
Do you have an order of magnitude?
100,000-ish.
Helps. There's your credit card fees, Dave.
All right, this is the year where we're scraping for pennies, so.
Let's hustle, we're like halfway done.
Yeah.
Okay, debt service is next. I mean, I think this is relatively simple. It's, believe it or not, our debt service, our projected debt service, we'll know more, on Tuesday at noon, but our projected debt service is going down about $430,000 in total, right? If you think about our debt service this year, it's $12.5 million. That's $5.7 million for our schools and $6.6 million for the town.
What were those numbers again?
5.7 million
And 6.6?
and 6.6. And then about 180,000 for sewer, which effectively is covered by the sewer charges. So debt service is down. Couple things to sort of remember. Half of Great Island was paid with long-term debt. So we're paying interest on that for the first, John, I think we had 2 interest payments this year coming up on that,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
The other half of Great Island was paid for a ban, but short-term piece of debt. And we used the premium that we sold it at to effectively pay the debt service that is at the end. So, from using tax dollars, we used the proceeds of the bond. I would say we effectively capitalized interest. So just know that as we're thinking about the overall cost flowing through our cash flow statement here, we didn't pay debt service on $40-odd million worth of debt, Great Island. And likewise on HHR, I think there was 24, 25
Somewhere around there.
of, that was basically a third of the project when the project was smaller.
Yep.
Where we also issued bans because we weren't sure necessarily the starting of that. And likewise, we're using the premium to effectively pay the debt service on that. So we haven't really paid debt service on Great Island. Largely that money that had been sitting around because that project got delayed, the investment earnings on that effectively covered the cost. So that really was kind of no harm, no foul on sort of the HHR side. It was effectively just sort of, if you will, escrowed, and now that money is going to be starting to be spent more rapidly. So, that's a little bit of a honeymoon that we may or may not have in the next year as we begin to sort of get like the full debt service effect, at least interest effect of the other half of Great Island and the first third-ish, or 40% of HHR. Where interest rates are today, doesn't look like there's any refinancing candidates that would save sort of the savings. Jen, I think we typically look at like 1.5% to 2% as like a minimum to be able to go out and sort of make it, from a present value perspective. So there's not a lot necessarily to do there. We are beginning to, Oxbridge restructured, we didn't pay principal for 2 years. That's starting to come on. Great Island, we structured the half that went long-term, not to pay for 2 years. We have another sort of 18 months until that starts to come on. But, there is going to be more sort of debt service in the future. All of this debt service, from a technical standpoint, sort of flows into the Board of Selectmen's operating budget. So that's it on debt service. We don't really have a choice as to pay it or not.
You mean we're not default? Is that what you said?
No, it's only student loan forgiveness, not municipal debt forgiveness.
We can always, we can recategorize it, right? Add student debt.
So the next one is federal and state grants and investment income. And I think it was Taylor and I and Dan had a good call with Jack and Jenny and may have been one other on this. So if you look at sort of the grants that we're assuming, relatively small here, 100,000 on the low SIP grant. And Jen, did I see the most recent email? Is there a small change in that?
Not necessarily in the dollar amount, but in their process. We used to have to apply project by project, and now what they're doing is we're certifying that we're going to use it in the way it's supposed to be used. They will send us all of the funds, and then I think in September, they're going to open up a reporting portal, and I'll have to tell them how we used it and demonstrate that it met their requirements. One little twist to that is they've always required that the project be in the approved capital improvement plan, which they always have been, but we haven't really formally approved the capital improvement plan. They've never been sticklers for that before, but I'm worried that maybe they will be now. So on your Tuesday agenda, you'll have an item to approve the fiscal 24 and fiscal 25 CIPs as presented, and then it'll go to the RTM the same way, just so that we have that marked off in case they require that we provide minutes or something showing that it was approved.
Jim, at the RTM, I'm proposing that we do those two approvals prior to doing the overall capital plan. So it's just a matter of order. That's your choice.
Thank you for catching that.
Okay. Jen, remind me where the ECS grant is?
Under Board of Selectmen. Are you looking in OpenGov? Are you looking in the Excel?
I've gone to Excel only.
Yeah, I think it's under BOS.
I know, but it's not.
Is that
General Government, Board of Selectmen.
It's the last one, Jim, if you're using Jim's document.
So it's recommended at 485,000.
And this was basically prescripted in the budget, isn't it? The state budget?
Yeah, it's off of the state budget number.
And I don't think, so if you, like, this is part of our cost sharing grant that we get every year. It's usually always what's in the governor's budget, with the small exception as to whether or not the Board of Ed was to sort of overbill under the ECR. And if they did, then that could sort of cut this grant, but we haven't seen that in any of the.
More recently, we've actually gotten additional funds in for prior year ECR adjustments. Doesn't sound like that's going to happen.
That have been sort of in our favor, right?
Yeah. So this year, we're going to get 70,000 for last year, but I would say next year, based on what's going on with ECR, we probably can't really plan on an adjustment.
In terms of, one of the questions we were talking about was the supplemental motor vehicle tax. And the Board of Selectmen had a $100,000 reduction in that, right?
Yes, because of the reduction in the mill rate due to rebound.
The likely reduction in the mill rate.
Yeah.
Right. Against the basically
Yeah.
flat aggregate value of motor vehicles.
Correct.
Other than that, I mean, the pilot program, is that the only property that we?
That we do our own pilot, yes.
Yeah. So there's not a lot here otherwise in the form of grants. Jen, anything missing here? Or that we talked about?
No, the only one you haven't mentioned is Town Aid Road, and that's projected to be essentially flat. I think it's about $337,000.
It's a byproduct of not getting much from the state, not much to talk about. The other thing we spoke about was investment income. There are two primary sources of investment income. There's the general fund, which is currently projected at $3.1 million, and then there's the investment income from the Reserve Fund for Capital Non-Recurring Expenses, and I think a couple other ones that are at 90-odd thousand.
Yeah, the only one with a tax impact is in RFC NRE, which is 90,000.
Yeah. Listen, we talked about that. Obviously, this year's investment income is up materially versus what we budgeted last year. If you remember, we kind of took that up at the end as rates were sort of, rapidly sort of climbing as we were going through the budget season. We're almost double of what we projected last year. I think, no doubt Fed's projecting a couple rate drops between now and the end of the year, likely 3, whether it's 50 or 75 basis points in total. We'll see. But I think, using the same model that we went through last year, if you recall, we took each fund, we looked at, well, here's when tax dollars come in, using round numbers. If we're charging $140 million of taxes, we generally are getting $70 million on July 1st and $70 million more on January 1st. Looking at bond proceeds and sort of making some assumptions there. Our model calibrates directionally with what's in here, based on some of the assumptions I'm making, which I'll send you guys around, a summary, tomorrow. I think there's room to probably add a couple $100,000 more above the $3.1 million projection. Again, this is revenue. No one knows what's going to happen with interest rates, how sticky they're going to be in terms of where they are now. But we do know, obviously, under budgeting this means we're overtaxing. Over budgeting this means we may draw down a little bit more out of the general fund than we expected. I think right now we have, and as we go through this exercise later tonight and tomorrow, we're all planning on, there's going to be a noticeable drawdown in our general fund, a few $1 million, I expect, give or take. So I think certainly when I look at the risk of over budgeting a revenue like this versus under budgeting, one of it, under budgeting, is more dollars we charge a taxpayer. Over budgeting could potentially draw down the general fund a little bit, which are still their tax dollars. So I would be in favor of raising this by a couple $100,000.
Jim, I would like to make some comments
Okay.
or answer some questions, and before you come up with that, let me show you historically what we've made, because we are $1 million over what we have ever made since 1986. So I will give you all that information. You can pass this around.
Okay.
And I want to tell you why we are there. I think there's enough there. So we are, right now, at the end of February's numbers, we're at $3,200,000, I think, 50,000. I'm going to move up just because it's easier. There is a very good reason. I don't think your model holds, quite frankly, because of what's changed. And the reason that we have such large numbers this year is because two things happened after the budget was done last year. The first was we were offered a sweeps product, which now, as of February, contributed $1.25 million. So if you take the $3 million that we've made now and take out the $1.25 million, that's a big hole. Okay, the second part of this is we've got very aggressive with T-bills. We weren't really doing T-bills at the last budget time. Last time I did the portfolio report, we had 59 million. Again, rates are going to fall. We've been told, I hear the same things you all hear. If you all are more tuned in than I am, let me know. But I lowered everything by 1%, which is where the 3.1 came in. And I don't project overall on a master spreadsheet because the rates are so different. But I projected by individual accounts, and that's where the 3.1 came in. Now, can you raise it? Sure you can. But if you're wrong, or we lose the sweeps, you're $1.2 million as of today in the hole. Where are you going to get that?
What's the current rate on that, Joan, on the sweeps?
It was 1.15 last time I looked.
Is there any reason to believe we're going to lose the sweeps?
I have no idea. Didn't know we
No,
were
but-
going to.
No,
I don't know.
But has anybody suggested to you
Yeah.
that the sweeps are going away? Is
No one
M&T
has
said we're not-
suggested
we're
it, and I
discontinuing this
haven't opened
project?
Pandora's box to ask.
Okay, but I'm just asking whether anybody has suggested that it's going away. So the answer is,
I don't know any other town who has it, and I've asked.
What is the sweep earning now?
It's earning, the last time I looked was 1.15%.
No, rate.
5.15%, sorry, it's late.
Wait, is that
I'm
five?
caffeinated, but man, it's late. I'm
Just to make sure I
frustrated.
heard, is that 5.15?
5.15%.
5.15. And is that, can I just,
Sure.
as we think about the sweep, that's daily liquidity, right?
Let me explain how it works. Yes.
Okay, and then just one other question. So it's daily liquidity, like you basically can call them up on Monday and they'll wire it to Jen on Tuesday?
We don't wire. This is an
No, no.
intra-bank
Okay.
transaction between M&T operating account
Yeah.
and M&T's sweep. Let me explain it with another
No, but
bank.
hey, Joan, just give me 1 minute. So I just want to make sure, so it's 5.1%, and it can basically be moved from, let's call it like the sister money market account right into our operating account.
It-
Right?
We don't have to touch it.
We don't touch it.
The
Okay.
bank doesn't.
It automatically
So it's
happens.
immediately available, right?
Yep,
And
it's automatic.
And all the money, the totality of the dollars that are in these sweep accounts, are these guaranteed by the FDIC, all of those dollars?
Everything up to the 250 in M&T is guaranteed. We don't
Okay.
have,
And
and we
everything
have a
above
collateral.
250 is just effectively the creditworthiness of those banks?
It's the creditworthiness of M&T. M&T has been our People's has been our lead bank for at least 25, 30 years? I don't know.
Yeah.
Long.
And what's-
Longer than, as long as I've been here, not
So the
longer.
amounts above 250 are just the corporate guarantee of the bank, and what are they
That's
rated?
right. Excuse me?
What are they rated?
I don't know what the rating is.
So then on STIF, it's 5.1 right now, STIF, I was just
Stiff
looking
is
this.
5 point, no, stiff is 5.42%
No, I was saying M&T, the sweep
today.
is 5.1?
Sweep is 5.15, stiff is 5.42. There is a, if you let me explain, there is a huge difference between doing a sweep and investing with stiff. With stiff, we have to wire in. One of the big issues that we have is float, okay? When we wire in, let me explain how it works, because I think it will make sense if I do. Eileen will wire into stiff, usually, I think it has to be before 11 o'clock, is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. 11 o'clock, that we want money out of stiff. Okay, so that day, we lose all interest from money in stiff. That's a float. Now, we're still using a 12 million a month cash
Roughly,
flow?
yeah.
Roughly, okay. So say Jen does it once a month. That's 12 days that we lose interest completely, because the wire has to go, wire goes into the state in Connecticut, the back office is in Boston at State Street. State Street then sends it to M&T, and then M&T deposits in our account. You've lost at least one day in float. Okay, that's, again, if we did it once a month, it's 12 days that we've lost money. I don't know how much that money is, it depends on how much.
So if you had, so I guess my question is, let's just say we had $10 million in STIF, and you wanted to move that to our operating account, how many days would that take to move it from?
At best,
Stiff?
1 day, but we'd lose 1 day
Okay.
completely. Okay, with a sweep, let me give you, can I give you another example?
No, I'm just saying,
Because I
so
think it's
just,
easier.
so you're saying we lose 1 day, STIF after they withdraw it and close out at the end of the day?
We have float. The thing that
Yep.
the biggest enemy we have is float. The key to making this, besides safety, is every nickel's invested every night. Okay, when you do a wire in and out, you've lost that opportunity. Okay, you have float of at least 1 day, maybe more. The law allows up to 5 days of float.
So I guess, Joan, I just want to just make sure everyone here, so what you're saying is, if you wire the money to STIF
It's we're usually
during the
requesting-
morning,
Right.
and we're to take it out the next day, 24 hours later, you'd earn no interest.
Right. Okay. Let me give you
Okay.
another example, because I think it's easier.
So, okay, so
Can
if
I
you were to do
finish?
that you're losing like a day of interest, right?
Yeah. Can I just explain
Yeah.
this? Because I'd like to just finish. Chase has a sweep. When we do our T-bills, we sweep. When we have a T-bill maturity coming due, we get our T-bill, it matures at 5 p.m. that night. That money is immediately moved into the Chase commercial account. No wires, no anything. It's an intra-bank transaction, even though it's JPMI moving to Chase commercial. So that money immediately earns, it's not a lot, but 2.55%. Goes from the 5% we're getting, but we never have any float. Float adds up. That's the big difference.
So when you say float, you mean a day of lost interest?
That's at least one day.
Okay.
So I just did a back of the envelope. If we are earning 5.15% at M&T, and we're earning 5.42% at Stiff, if we earn a full year's of interest on $10 million, that's $515,000 we'd be earning from M&T. If we earned 5.42% on 353 out of 365 days at Stiff, we'd be earning 524,000, 9,000 more.
Don't forget, these rates change daily.
No, I understand. I understand. I'm just saying, there's a trade-off between float and a higher rate of interest, as long as risk is equivalent.
Again, 2.5 years ago, Stiff was earning 0.
Rates were zero.
I'm only making the
No, they
point that
weren't.
at a higher rate of interest.
Stiff was at 0.
There's a rate of interest.
Yep.
There's an increase in the rate of interest that pays for the float. That's all I'm saying.
Not necessarily, Dan. I
No,
mean,
but at the current, all I'm saying is at the
Yeah, there
current
is.
rates.
It's-
The math is the
You
math.
can do
At the
it
current-
today.
I'm not saying it's guaranteed, Joan. I'm not saying it's guaranteed.
There's
I'm
no
not saying-
guarantees.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that at a certain rate, the higher rate pays for the float. That's all I'm saying.
Again.
And you can't guarantee that higher rate, but if that rate were to exist, then it would more than offset the loss in flow.
So the
That's
other-
all I'm saying.
Potentially, Dan,
Yeah,
but I don't
potentially.
agree
That's all
that
I'm
it
saying,
will.
potentially.
Hey, Jack, just, if you could wait for our board just to finish, and then we'll certainly take a couple questions. So,
Cash management.
so in looking how you
Thank you, Jack.
projected earnings here, there are a couple of banks, I think this is DR Bank, is that's Darien Rowayton?
Yes.
And so, and I just looked through my stuff, so for example, just for our board's comment, M&T is rated BBB. And I think the Stiff Fund is rated AAA, right? So again, some of these smaller banks like Darien Rowayton, do we do like regular banking, like corporate
These-
banking business with them?
These are, a DR bank is 100% FDIC insured plus collateralized. So that investment is completely safe. Okay? And M&T, anytime you have a larger bank, we don't have enough banks in Connecticut for me to put in small investments. So again, this bank has been our bank for, again, at least 20 years. We went through this in part of the reason why they've given us, I believe, I don't know this for a fact, they've given us this sweep account, and there are other people here who might have M&T accounts. I don't know anybody else who gets that, is we're an important customer to M&T. And they have given us this product. It came in last April after some of the banks defaulted. We had problems with Silicon Valley and all this, but we first started talking about it in April. It came online in June, I believe. Okay. Again, they might not carry forward, they might. But this is something that didn't exist when we did our budget.
Well, but I mean, money markets have been around for a long time. Long time. So I guess when I look at like the Darien Rowayton Bank, like for example, like I think there was close to $300,000 in there, and they're guaranteed up to $250,000. And so I'm just trying to understand, like some of the banks, just so we can understand the rates, because I mean ultimately it's just rate times amount. Like Fairfield County Bank, like do we do like corporate? Like do they process any of our credit cards or?
No, Fairfield County Bank, first of all, it's a mutual. We're an owner as well as a depositor. Okay? They're not even, you're not going to find a rating per se because it's owned by its depositors. It's a different animal than what we're talking about.
No, but I think, so the question though is, do we do business other than deposit money at?
I don't
at Darien
know.
No,
I don't know.
to your knowledge. At
I said I
Darien
don't
Row-
know.
At Darien Rowayton Bank, do we do business, to your knowledge, other than deposit money?
No,
And the same thing with Fairfield County?
no.
That was your
I've said to
question,
my
right?
knowledge,
Yeah.
no.
Okay. Because like I've looked at the rates there, and I guess like Stiff is a little bit like a mutual, because effectively the depositors of Stiff, right?
STIF is a
Benefit
mutual
from-
fund owned by the state. And again, Jim, I think you need to go back with some history here. We were out of STIF for 11 years because it almost went under. And it was the Board of Finance and the first selectman who pushed us to get out. There are towns that are our neighboring towns that still will not do business with STIF.
Okay, so,
Again, it's, I think it's fine. I think the new investment manager is doing a good job. But again, it is, some people rate that differently than we do. 11 years, we did not do business.
so just some of the questions, I've been following this, and I think you put together great summaries of each account, how much money is in it, and exactly what the rate that was earned during that monthly period. And a lot of these are like sort of deposit accounts, and I guess my question on some of these were, like, a lot of that money just sits in there because I don't think we use Fairfield County Bank to process credit cards or do any of that. They always seem to be like 100 basis points below where like the United States or Treasury bills are, you know, of short 1, 2, 3. Have you thought about taking some of that money that's in these small banks, I think BBB minus, and moving them into, moving those dollar amounts, and not large dollar amounts, but 3 to 4 to 5 million into shorter term Treasury bills where we could pick up 100 basis points on?
Jim, we didn't do Treasury bills until this June. We were not given permission to do Treasury bills. We've had a relationship with Fairfield County Bank for at least 20 to 25 years. There is a legacy there that we had it. Those deposits were made long before we were allowed to do Treasury bills. We had $59 million last month in T-bills. You want more? We could do more. It's what Jen will allow me to do. You know,
John,
that's
I
what
think-
our cash flow needs.
I think the question is, unless I'm getting ahead of what Jim and maybe Dan are thinking is, if we have an account that's got 250, 350 in it, and it's not an operational account, it's not being used as an escrow account, it's not being used to do anything except just have money in it, it might be time, I'm just throwing this out there, to maybe reevaluate the relationship and close it down, right? Like, so we have less, unless it's being used for, I'll go back to.
It is not.
It is, these are investment accounts. Jen and I had already talked about this, but planning to relook at all of our accounts after budget season is over. That was in our plan. However, what I would caution you is, and I know there is a prejudice against smaller banks, but let me give you an example of 3 years ago. Stiff was at 0, Chase was at 4 basis points, and I negotiated up to 6 basis points. Bankwell gave us 55 basis points. It all depends on the individual funding needs of those banks. And each bank has a different funding need, and they set up what their investment, what they're willing to pay based on their individual funding need. The key is, it's just like, do you have all stocks in your portfolio? Or do you have mutual funds? Do you have stocks? Do you have bonds? This is the type of thing. We have a diversified portfolio here. Can we reallocate some of that money? Yes, we've already talked about it. That's not the issue. The issue is you want to have a diversified group because you never know. The first time I saw Stiff at 0, I called them and I said, is this for real? Is this a mistake? And they said, yeah, we're building up our reserves.
So I think what you're hearing from us, I mean, the resolution that this board passed, which was I think mid-August of 2022, is when we sort of allowed, you know, bond funds and so forth to go into any type of U.S. government security that had a remaining maturity of less than 12 months. So I think what we're saying is, and listen, as we all know, and you know, Joan, you're very well aware of, like, yield curves change, investment objectives, and the demand that different banks have for money always change, and so, you know, it's always this is a little bit of a moving target. But if we're not, some of these smaller banks, if we're not necessarily using them for other type of operating activities or processing payroll or credit cards or other types of things, only because, as Dan points out, when you apply small percentages to very big numbers, it can mean a big effect for the taxpayer, and then ultimately how much we budget here. So if we move some of these that are just sitting in, I think, so like Fairfield County, those banks are just like kind of overnight deposits, right?
No, they're not.
Those are CDs?
Some of them are CDs, some of them are in money markets. I've allocated, there's a legend on your account
Yeah.
which allocates and also on the portfolio reports you get. Again, Fairfield County Bank is a different animal because it is a mutual, and as I said, it's a legacy bank. We will be looking at how much we're putting, but
Yeah.
again, when I'm 100% FDIC insured at these small banks, and they are giving me very good rates, above 5% on some of them, and it's 100% FDIC insured and collateralized, I think that's a good deal. And again, they're just investment accounts. Yes, I agree. We're not doing other things. We're not making other money, but we're not incurring other expenses either.
Well, I think, some of these small banks, I mean,
But I think that's up to the discretion of the treasurer, Jim.
it is 100%. So I
Okay.
mean, I think what we're just trying to understand, since, it is 100% your choice, some of these, having it in an overnight deposit at a bank or a money market at 4%, when that bank is triple B and you have US Treasuries 110 basis points higher and they're AAA, is there how should we think about?
Well, how much more than 59 million do you want putting in one place? I did a ladder. I did 2 ladders. That's all in 1 year. And again, bless Jen, thank her, because she said you can do a second one. When you got 59 million in one type of instrument, I think that's a concentration, even if it's U.S. government treasuries. Now, I'm all for U.S. government treasuries. I think they're worth it. But how much of our town money has to be in one place?
Well, I understand diversification. Well, listen, I think, do others have questions?
I want to be reminded of why we have 22 million at 255 at Chase. That seems dramatically low.
That's borrowed funds.
Yes.
And so we can't invest it at a better rate than that.
We can, but we are arbitrage restricted at one point, and that becomes a whole other exercise.
Yeah.
But in theory, if HHR hadn't stalled, we would not have that amount of money there.
Yeah.
So I would say that's unusual that we would have borrowed and it would just sit like that.
Aren't we not allowed to make money on it or something like that? Did this pop up last year or at some point?
Yes.
You have a time period in which you could get a safe, allowable one that pays you 10%, you could do it, but only for a set period of
But
time.
only for a set period,
Yeah.
right.
And Rob, we do that now. I mean, I think she's doing a good job. Like,
Yeah.
if you look at our Chase account right now, I think, Joan, is it close to 3%?
We know, what you're referring to was our NIC I think was 3.1.
No, that's the Chase account.
The Chase, I know, but I'm answering you. And I had that raised to get it closer to our NIC bond rate to make sure that we were closer, because those are bond funds.
Yeah.
So they were 2% and I had them raised to 2.55. Now, if you want me to go back tomorrow and call them and say, we do our new bonds next week, can you do a little more? I do this.
So you'll
all the
push them
time.
up to the tick?
I push everybody up.
Got it.
I call constantly to get higher rates.
Well, that's good. I mean, listen, we, as you guys know, we have our bond funds, like Dan saved so much money on Oxbridge, we have a couple $1 million left in there. That's at, like,
Kip had nothing to do with
and Rob, we are earning arbitrage on that, we are picking that up. Like, we borrowed that money, the arbitrage yield, restricted yield was 1.4%, and like, we're earning, I think, Joan, we're earning like, what, close to 3% now in Chase?
No, we're earning 2.55%.
2.55, so
Okay.
we're earning about 100 basis points
points,
of positive arbitrage in that.
But
on some of
the
stuff.
idea was to get it closer to what our bond NIC combined. And that Mark gave us that number because we wanted the combination of what it was. And we got it as close as we could.
Okay.
Okay.
TD looks good too. I mean, TD Bank looks good. Like, that might be a smart place to move from Fairfield County to TD. I think it's probably an increase in ratings and rate, right?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Taylor.
TD Bank looks like they're paying better rates than Fairfield County Bank, and they're probably better rated too. Like, can we move?
Again, they're two different animals. TD Bank goes up and down depending on, for example, the rates came up when TD Bank was denied an acquisition. Okay, their cost of funds just went up. The Fed came in and, you know, again, for those of you who follow this, they were trying to, I can't even remember who they were, do you remember who they were going to buy? But they were going to buy somebody, they were going to combine with somebody, and the Fed went, no, because, and I think it was for money laundering protection, they didn't think their requirements were enough, I don't really remember, but they were denied the acquisition. Well, their cost of funds just went up like this, so that means my rates went up, I took advantage. And that's what I do, is I take advantage opportunistically when rates go up. For example, at TD Bank, you'll see a 3.3% for $191 because operationally, we need to have an operating account there to be able to move money. That's why that's sitting there. Would I have that for any other reason? No, not at 3.3%. But that allows me to move money into the CDs and out of the CDs.
I have a quick general question. Does a triple B rating on a commercial bank mean something different than a triple B rating on a corporate bond?
So short answer would be no. The rating agencies have different methodologies of how they rate and the leverage metrics that they prescribe to financial institutions like a bank versus, you know, like an industrial company. But generally, they're meant to score across industries. So a triple B rating is generally triple B, bears same type of default risk compared to like a triple A.
The difference would be SIFI, right, a systemically important financial institution. Yeah. So that's one where it's not a guarantee, but they're considered to be so important that efforts would be made to not let them fail. So post 08, there was this notion. So you could see a single A versus a double A within that population, but they're all kind of maybe artificially supported by the SIFI designation. But I don't think other than Chase, these banks wouldn't be part of that.
There are no kind of smaller community banks that fit in
well,
that category.
These are not all community banks. TD is one of the 5 largest banks in Canada with a total U.S. presence, so it's a major bank. M&T was, and again, just so you know that I don't do this in a vacuum, I literally called the head of Morgan Stanley's equity research, former head, who was also a bank analyst. And I said, because Monica was a little concerned at the time, and said, what about M&T? And he goes, are you kidding me? You know, he goes, are you kidding me? There's nothing going to happen with that. I said, okay, thank you very much. I'm not doing this in a vacuum, what Joan thinks or what Joan researches. I call people. I research this stuff, okay? Example, Bankwell, there's another one. I have $1 million there. Well, you see a rate of 3.46 because we've basically gone out through what's called ICS, for those of you familiar, that all the money that is in that $750,000 account is put in other banks that are 100% FDIC insured. So each bank that's out with 3 banks, I pick the banks from the list. I picked who I didn't want, like PacWest or some of the other banks that were notorious at the time. All that money is FDIC insured, as is pretty much the Bankwell CD that's 100% insured and collateralized. So is that a good rate for no risk? Yeah, it's a real good rate. Those are the trade-offs that we make. Going back to your original issue, you can pick whatever number you want me to make. I'm going to probably make $4 million this year, okay? Doing a mass model does not work when you have a difference in rate, and which is what, I think you asked me the question, Dan, or I'm not sure, somebody asked the question. Is there a master spreadsheet? No, there isn't. I did this each individually, both in November and in December, from the numbers we had, okay? Again, for 0% risk, are certain rates better? Yeah, they're fine for 0% risk, because at the end of the day, all that matters is the safety for the taxpayer, okay? And eliminating float, that's a big one. When I first came to this job, we had, again, maybe you're familiar with it, but you have 5 days float on a check. You're allowed that, okay? And the law still holds. With our remote capture machines now, we've pretty much eliminated that float. We have one machine in the tax office, one machine in the finance office. float is a very big issue. Because if you don't have it invested, you can't earn anything, right? So,
Okay. Well, listen, I think this was good. Why don't we maybe rethink some of this stuff? I think we can certainly make the final decision next time. I think, listen, certainly learn something new. I didn't know we lost a day by going into stiff. But
we would lose a day wiring between banks, no matter who it was,
okay.
okay?
I just want to give some historical perspective. Maybe Jack remembers.
I wanted to ask.
No. Her predecessor, Bill McIntyre, wouldn't even show up at our meetings. And basically it was the finger. I do what I do, and it wasn't good cash management, and the float wasn't managed. But he's passed, so no more speaking ill.
Yeah, we won't speak ill of the dead. But in 2005, when I came over, I was asking the tax collector to take, for those of you who look at statements, you have ledger collected, 1, 2, 3 day float. I don't know if any of you remember that or look at these statements. I would ask the tax collector to take it out on the collected, because we were sitting for 5 days without an investment.
Well, listen, Joan, I think this has been helpful. I think we're going to move on, and I appreciate all the information you shared with us. I think we're going to move on to the next item.
Can I just make a comment that I wanted to make before?
Yeah.
Okay. Just for the record, so our citizens understand the difference between a sweep account and STIF. In a sweep account at any bank, they zero out all of your accounts, and at 8 o'clock when the Fed opens up, the money that they took out is back in your account. If you're moving money back and forth to STIF, you don't have no guarantee unless they're sending it ACH in the morning, and that's a requirement, that you're going to have it back in the account at 8 o'clock in the morning. And if it's not there at 8 o'clock in the morning, any transactions that you have are going to be rejected. This is not a sweep account. And if we also have to consider what the cost of doing this, because if we were going to move money in and out, and I don't know how many accounts there are, let's just say that we have 5 different operating accounts there, that's 10 days, we're operating for 240 days, and we're trying to emulate a sweep account. That's over 2,000 entries that the finance department would have to make to have money go in and out. Sweep account does it all internally. They've been operating like this for years of that. I know from working at Chase and other things like that we had it. And so that's the big difference. Now, whether or not we move more money into STIF, that's based upon the cash management needs. So that's the only thing.
Well, I appreciate it. Just for point of clarification, I don't think anyone on this board was suggesting we use STIF as a daily account. More so looking at small BBB rated community banks like Fairfield, like Darien and Growing and so forth, and about moving them over because we thought it had daily limit.
But I just wanted to be on the record.
Yeah, no, I think everyone understands
Well, they
that.
do now.
So moving on, next item that we're going to talk about here is, is fund balance. Thanks, Joan.
Yep.
All right, we're going to do this kind of quickly. So,
I have a 6 a.m.
You're
flight.
sure about that?
well then, no, we're not.
I was told this meeting was going.
We're here today, right?
Didn't we say an hour and a half?
I was told this meeting was going an hour and a half.
I heard the beer's coming at 12.
I was told that an hour and a half
Okay.
ago.
I'm going to hang around for another hour and a
Okay,
half.
So,
let's get Jen on.
first part of it is you have in the master file that I sent out to everybody, the updated fiscal 24 projection, which is for everything as of March 31st. So, big picture, what we're projecting is a positive result of operations of about $4.6 million. I can make it a little bigger if you need. Really driven by revenue. About $4 million better than budget on revenue, and about 660,000 better than budget on the expenditure side. What you have down below are the significant variances, what's driving that. And on the revenue side, I don't have investment income on here. But
it's
that's the big one.
2.3, right?
Yeah. And then behind that is really tax collections, some intergovernmental revenue at about 300,000, and then you get into smaller variances. On the expenditure side, we have the $210,000 deficit for the Board of Ed. And so then on the town side, we're about 800,000 to the good. And I actually had some difficulty digging into that. Legal, we're about 125,000 better. That's mostly on regulatory counsel, which is about 148,000 surplus. Contingency, just because we haven't moved it to some places yet, it's about 70,000 for the salary contingency and about 148,000 on the general contingency. There are a couple deficits in departments that'll go to, but that all balances out. Where we've had big savings in the past and we don't is salaries. We only have about a $200,000 surplus projected in salaries this year, and that's for full-time and part-time. In prior years, that was approaching $1 million.
That was vacancies in the police department.
Yeah, it was primarily in the police
Yeah.
department. This one, we have the one dispatch vacancy, and about 60,000 of that is the fact that we didn't fill the emergency management director. And then there's a couple, short-term vacancies that have occurred, so nothing big. Solid waste disposal, we're over on the expenditure side, but we're also better than budget on the revenue side. That's the same story we've had for the last couple of years because of the volume. A little bit to the good on electricity. Social Security is one that I do want to highlight. We have about $88,000 projected surplus on that. So one of the tabs that I sent you is that we could take a little haircut on that in fiscal 25. I went back and looked at some other items that reduce Social Security eligible wages. So I think we can take a little haircut.
So is this the employer portion?
Yep, the employer share.
Town/board? Okay.
Yep. And so there's really nothing big on the town side. It's a lot of lots of pluses and minuses
A lot of
throughout.
40s and 60s and 30s. And
Exactly.
So if you had the 127 all the way down with a minus 63, that's your 659 positive?
No. That is 375.
So what's the expenditure up top on line 7?
That's our total expenditures, but we would have to include almost every line item to
These are the
get to that
highlights.
number.
So these are the highlighted
These are
ones,
the big
okay.
highlights, and
And-
the highlights really only explain about half of it.
And the revenue side is all those items plus?
Plus investment income.
Investment income.
Yep. So then, kind of going down, where does that leave us on fund balance? Ignore that this says 23 and not 24. We started the year at 30.8. So far, we've only had one appropriation from fund balance for $26,000 for the consultant for the harbor dredging permits. And then this just walks through our projected revenue surplus, the town expenditure surplus of a little over 800, and then the BOE expected deficit of 210. So that puts us at about just under 35.5 for our fund balance projected at year end.
You're just pulling out B of A just to...
Just so that we
show-
know
so we know what it
what's on the
is.
town side, what's on the board
And I
side.
thought Rich, maybe I heard this wrong the other day. I thought something's being added for another 50 or 100.
And that's
What-
how I
what-
got to the 210,
Oh,
because I
does
think
that
he was
include that?
around
Okay,
160.
that's cool.
And then with
Yep.
the ECR adjustment, we put it up to 210.
That was it, the
Yeah.
ECR?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a lot of time. That's only as of the end of February, right?
Yeah, we
Right.
still got March, April, May, June, like 4 more months.
He's checking in the couch cushions, right?
Yeah, that's
And then
to
the
David's
last-
point, we're looking for money, right?
The last item, we could go check the employee lounge. The last item is
Skittles?
the RFC and RE reserve. We closed out some projects, I think in February or March, I can't remember which one. So we currently have a balance of about 428,000. But as I mentioned, you're going to have the Norton Heights Fire Department coming for an additional appropriation for their retaining wall. And on Tuesday, you will be hearing about 4 items from the police department. If all of those are approved, your RFC and RE reserve balance will be 268,000.
Yeah, I also think about the transportation and security proposals from the Board of Education as it relates to the fund balance.
So that leads us to our next tab.
Choreograph.
What I wasn't able to get done for yesterday is this, where we can play around with scenarios. But briefly, what I want to touch on is and I'm sorry that this is so small, the Moody's 20% thing that they put in, their change in methodology. So what they look at is two ratios: total available funds as a percentage of total revenues that are on a GAAP basis. So that includes our on behalf teacher pension and OPEB, which is 19 million-ish. And then they also look at our liquidity, which are our total cash and investments as a percentage of our total revenues on a GAAP basis. So where that put us when Moody's did their analysis, and I couldn't quite tie to their numbers, these are a smidge lower, 37.68 on the available funds and 46.11 on the liquidity. But we get a bump because we have unspent bond and primarily band funds. So those are showing up as cash and helping our liquidity, and they're also fund balance because we get a credit, even though it's not technically recorded, we get a credit for these bands that are payable because they're money that we took in. So if we factor that out and we're always going to have some impact from bonds, especially if we borrow this time of year, because it's based on year end, we're not going to spend them down very quickly unless we're repaying ourselves. So there's always going to be some impact. But if we remove the impact from the bands, then, sorry, going the wrong way.
You're only removing the bands from the HHR, right?
And there was minimal impact from Great Island because we had about 6 million of unspent that was factoring into the cash.
Yeah. All right.
But if we take out the 23 million, which was HHR and capital projects, and we zero out Great Island acquisition, that puts us at 22.95 for available funds and 31.35 for liquidity.
So the 22.95 is their 20% threshold.
Right, and
So we're 3% over their 3.
if we back everything out and we do it very conservatively.
Yeah, conservatively.
Yep. And, it's not that much of a change from us looking at what the general fund balance is, because that's the bulk. If we back out bonds, bands, that sort of thing, the general fund is the bulk of our available funds and our cash.
So that 3% equates to how much money?
Well, did you?
That's the next, thank you. Are you like
What is this,
feeding
Fred
her
and
all these
Ginger?
lines?
So I didn't do it in terms of exactly amount of money, because I had this spreadsheet that was looking at what are our different possible combinations of adding to the budget for capital, drawing down fund balance, that kind of thing. So fund balance contribution of $1 million brings that 22 down to 22.45. If we were to bring down fund balance by 3.5, we're still at 21.2% for that available funds.
Bingo. Magic chart.
What would you like to talk about next, Dan?
Everybody to adjourn?
Commute home.
And just so we know, that is with 0 cuts. Like, that's with us doing nothing to the current budget.
Right, so I would say on the Moody's, we're good. The other stuff that we focus on is this section, the budgetary impact.
But
And-
before we move away from this, okay? The old way we thought about this, right, which was solving to 12%, and we had this magic $12 million over that, or something like that, right? This kind of revised way, I'm not gonna say revised way of thinking about it suggests we're still over, but perhaps not to the same degree.
I would agree, yes.
Right, so it's not like we've got
As much room.
as much room.
And if we get another 20, it hurts our rating?
It was one of their
One of their
factors that could lead to a downgrade.
Okay, so it's not black and white.
No.
It's just a, it's just a contributing
Yes.
factor. Okay.
And the available funds is 20%, weighted 20% for the Moody's rating, and the liquidity is 10% of their total rating.
And Jen, this is backwards looking. You have this here, right? This is the number of, this amount of cash we had in the prior fiscal year, the way you're doing it?
I did it assuming no, I did it on the 23 year end, assuming no bans. I can roll that forward and say, where do I think would be no bans in 24?
But just to be clear, when you say no bans, you mean really no unspent bond proceeds?
Yes.
So it's really the fact that we didn't really spend any of the HHR, and we raised an extra 6 for Great Island and only used about $1.5 million, right? That's the only benefit, but that's backward looking. So if we're gonna do this frontward looking, would we look at, well, hey, this is where we think we're gonna start the year, and then when David gets done finishing these 3 schools, like how much cash do we think we're gonna have at the end of the year? Because don't we need to make sure that we're not using up too much today, such that when they look at us at the end of next year?
So,
I think you took the bans out.
again, starting with where we ended, 6/30/23, 37% and 46%. And then a baseline for, ignore that, I don't know what I was thinking with the baseline. Oh, yeah, I do know what I was thinking. So if we had just expected revenues, result of operations across all of our funds, and I will admit that on many of the funds, it was not a very detailed projection. But just where we expect all the funds to end up and how much cash we expect to have on hand as a baseline, we'd be at 33%, 34% and 42%. But that's still factoring in that we're gonna be issuing some bans and some bonds. They're not gonna be spent right away, and we're gonna get the benefit of that through the end of the fiscal year.
That's why you left the 49 in, but took the 22 out?
Right, because the 49 is already spent, so it's really not, what the Great Island is giving us is a little bit of bump on the liquidity with the unspent funds, but HHR was giving us a big bump on available funds.
But
And there's no
the analysis you did for the 22% subtracts all those amounts.
Right, so
Right, so that's a relatively conservative way
It's
to
very
look
conservative.
at funds that are available to us to draw down on in this budget cycle.
Yep, it's very conservative, and it's just making sure that when we do get out of the cycle of issuing large amounts of debt, and we get back to a more normal level, and more on the method of we spend the money up front and we just pay ourselves back, and we don't have any period of unspent borrowed funds, we're gonna be a lot closer to that no bans, super conservative way of looking at it.
That should just be the regular way of looking at it, I think. I mean,
I think this was a good exercise just to make sure that we're gonna be within Moody's parameters and not risking anything, but it's not very different than the old way of looking at it, except, as Dan said, it maybe makes us think that we're not as much excess as perhaps we thought we were when we're comparing it to the 12%.
Well,
I think we
yeah, but
intuitively knew that,
To be
too.
fair, the 12% was the floor below which we shall never fall, but our operating practice is closer to 15.
Yes.
Yeah, that was always the sort of tweak between the double A and single A, right? Or the
No.
double A and triple A?
No.
No, AAAs are way more.
Was 30%,
Yeah.
right? And double A was 15%. So when you look at our scorecard, we were always, in terms of fund balances, percentage of revenues, we were always kind of double A.
Double A. Yeah, it's a demographic information.
So
It's really
I'd love to, I mean, not
It's really.
I'd love to kind of, I always think about that 12%.
Wealth, the town's wealth.
I'd always rather look at that as 15%.
Also,
'cause that's what we
So
always.
collection
if that's
rate.
gonna be the practice, then I think that we should update the fund balance policy and put some wording in there of, you know, the target percentage is this. The minimum, if it falls to this point, we take action to actively increase it.
I think that's a great idea, because that would give us more latitude, well, latitude's the wrong word, definition over how much availability we have.
And-
Rather than it kind of being, well, we don't want to get too close to the 15, but if we make it a policy, then we can get close to the 15,
And
or
I
the
think-
17, or whatever it is.
You know, when we say the amount in excess of 12%, I think we all agree we don't want to be down at 12%, but we're saying, oh, well, the amount in excess of that is this huge number, which can send the message of we're hanging on to more than we should.
Yeah, that's been the message sort of floating around some of the boards. It's always like, you guys are carrying so much more because they looked at it as in terms of our fail-safe, right? Which is 12, which is not what we ever targeted, so.
Right, so I think we should revise the policy and revise the way that we say what is the excess.
And a quick question, what made Moody's change its parameters and
Oh, I have
might it
no
do
idea.
so again?
I have no idea. I do think that,
Is there something going on out there that will cause them to revise them?
oh yeah,
Further-
probably.
further
I think
again?
they've revised it 2 times in the 8 years that I've been here.
As a former rating agency analyst, I will tell you that it can change for any reason whatsoever.
That's good news.
Including like a new manager of the department?
Like they're bored and they want to just,
And
sort of like the gap.
They're changing.
Yeah, I think the
They're like the gap
thinking
people.
is, if you look across total town funds instead of just the general fund balance, you know, we probably have through administrative actions or board actions, we could, if we had to, we could grab from fund balance in one fund and pull it into the general fund if we had to. And likewise, if one other fund needed, it could draw from the fund, our general fund. So I think that's why they switched to looking across all funds.
Yeah.
But given our situation with all those unspent bond funds, I think it falsely raised our metrics.
And there's no net against that. I mean, they don't look at what I would call, what we would call like a current maturity. They don't look at the fact that you got $30 million worth of bands and you have a 12-month, or in this case, like 3-month maturity.
No, because I think the expectation is you will, if you don't spend it, you're gonna pay it back, and now you haven't spent it, or you're gonna permanently finance it and bond it, in which case then it truly does become fund balance until you draw it down.
Given the change in methodology, we're talking about changing the threshold, the language around the threshold, or the percentage around the threshold. Are we going to continue to use the general fund 12, 14, 15, 16%? Or are we going to change the policy to reflect this new methodology and change the language altogether?
I don't think we need to change our policy to fit Moody's methodology. I think that we should, maybe even on a year-end basis, when I give you our year-end report, I can also put in, and here's our 2 Moody's ratios. After we have the audit, just so that we're keeping an eye on it and we know that we're not straying too far from where we want to be.
So are you thinking that the right direction is to just change it from saying that our limit is 12%, since operationally we target 15, we should just change it and say that the limit is now 15?
I don't think we want to say the limit, or I would leave it up to you, but to think about, limit to me means when do you actually take action to start actively replenishing your fund balance? And it's not necessarily when you fall below your target, because you may say, oh, we fell a little bit below, but it was an odd year, we typically expect to be adding to our fund balance. But if you put, say, 15% as your target, 12% as your minimum, if you hit 12%, you go, we actually have to do something. Either we have to add it into the budget and do a little bit of a tax to start replenishing that, or you actually take action at that point.
So we're adding effectively a formal addendum of a target separate from the limit.
That would be my recommendation. I think another exercise that goes along with this is going through what are the potential draws on our fund balance, because what we face here in the Northeast is very different than what Florida faces or California faces and what the draws on their fund balance may be. We have a lot less, so we don't need to maintain as high of a fund balance. But I think we should look at what are the potential draws, how likely are they to happen, what's the worst case scenario of how much they could be, and see what that total comes out to as well, compared to if we say 15% of revenues, that equals this exercise equaled that, are they even close, or do we need to rethink it a little bit more?
Jen, given this sort of liquidity approach, I assume, are they looking at it at the last fiscal year end?
Yes. So next year when we go out to the market, they'll be looking at 6/30/24.
So So some of these, like the increased frequency, let's just call them these special appropriations, like 500,000 here, a million there. So do you think they impact any of this calculation?
No, and I think it's timing related. So if part of your budget right now, if you did a special appropriation in September, it's likely that it's going to be spent by the time we get to June 30th. If you do a special appropriation and it goes through the budget process and gets to the RTM in May and becomes effective May 23rd this year, it's not likely that it's going to be spent. So say the $1 million for school security. Yes, we've appropriated $1 million of fund balance, but it's still going to show up as fund balance. It's just going to move into the capital fund as fund balance because it's not going to be spent by June 30th.
And does spent mean encumbered or spent mean spent?
Encumbered or spent. So if we actually have a PO on it, it would, it won't see, in the general fund, it's committed fund balance and it still counts as available funds.
But
Because they're looking beyond even just the unassigned fund balance.
But thinking about some of the things our partners on the Board of Ed sent, so and some of the timing related, just given when school starts. So if we were to appropriate it before June 30th, they could use it then to go out, put a bid,
Yep.
get people to bid seriously and so forth. But if they were not to take delivery, if you will, or agree to the bid until after that, it still counts towards fiscal
Yep.
24 liquidity.
Yep.
My question would be is how would Moody's know if something's been appropriated or not?
They do track us. I think when we're getting ready for.
What reporting do we make in public statement of any kind that says we've issued a purchase order or contract for XYZ?
That they don't, but if I were the analyst, I'd be out on our website pulling up the monthly report that shows fund balance, special appropriations that we've done so far.
We're not establishing a new policy as a part of this budget, right? Can we
No.
table this for another night?
So the last piece of this is over on the left, and I'm gonna clean this up, add to the potential cut list all the things that came up tonight, and I'll send this out tomorrow. But what we can do is play around with different scenarios of fund balance contribution of the 1.8-ish that we have hanging out there for Board of Ed, if we funded it with some of it with fund balance, if we added some of it to the budget, and we can do different combinations of that and see how these all
Perfect.
come out.
So Jen, just on column B and C, just like column B would reduce the amount of money that we show fiscal 24 year end,
Yep.
okay, which will be used for bonding in fiscal 25. Column C would not.
Right, column C will increase your taxes that are necessary.
Or can we not make an appropriation from fund balance, but that appropriation doesn't become effective until July 1?
You can.
I thought we kind of have three tools. We have like the
You can,
special
but if
route,
you're-
which is right away, the cash route, which is cash from available on July 1, and then taxes available. No?
So appropriating from fund balance and making it effective July 1st is the exact same of putting it in the budget and using that much of fund balance to support the budget.
When
And
did we
it's
do-
cleaner, it's fewer actions that have to go through boards.
When did we do it last year? Didn't we do it in,
We do, the one that we do to fund next year capital, we do effective now, so then it comes out of general fund balance and it becomes capital fund balance.
okay.
But again, then those appropriations become effective July 1st.
But it doesn't hurt our liquidity because we're just moving.
No,
from
we're
one
just
bucket.
shifting it and not spending any of it yet.
What are we trying to do with B and C here? Never mind. I know what you're doing, but I don't know if I know.
I'll send it out tomorrow
Cut
and I'll write it up.
Make the first cut tomorrow. Let's see what it looks like.
So you send this out tomorrow?
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning? Great.
Okay.
I don't know about morning,
Only because we need to
but it will
think-
be tomorrow.
So, yeah, this wasn't in the spreadsheet you sent us yesterday, right?
No, I just added this in today.
Okay, so the other two things, just, we talked about fund balance, so grand list and collection rate, right?
Yep.
Just because we need to be thinking about what we're gonna set tomorrow, on Tuesday.
So in the file that you do already have is the grand list detail that Jim talked about a little bit. It's updated for after the Board of Assessment Appeals. I left in before BAA, I'm sorry that it's so small. I left in before BAA, added after, and then the dollar and percent change are after BAA to after BAA, because those are the final grand lists for each year. So I think I told you the other night it came down a little bit, but it wasn't a huge adjustment after Board of Assessment Appeals.
Yeah.
And then collection rate, current tax collection percent is our big file where we look at the last few years of collections. So our 5-year average
43 basis points.
is 99.73, which leaves us at 99.48 if we continue to bring it down 25 basis points.
Last year we did 99.41, I think.
99.48 also last
48.
year.
So go back to the history on that. So 99, what's our lowest in the last 5 years?
99.3 in fiscal 19. I think that was the first year we
99.
started.
Doesn't that say 99.78?
Oh, you're talking actual?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were looking at our budgeted. 99.74. 99.68 in fiscal 20.
So I think it's a legitimate question whether we should continue to have that 25 basis point discount when we've never really been, in the last 5 years, we've never, listen, things can change, but
Well, in the
again, this leads to surpluses.
In the
When we haircut this collection assumption by 25 basis points and actually achieve what the historical average is, then we've, again, overcharged our residents.
But we put it back
Just
to
by the
next
way,
year
not
by
just-
using fund balance.
Exactly, yeah.
What's that?
We use fund balance next year to bring it down. So we may be overtaxing, but we're using that fund balance in next year, so it averages out.
But Dan, what I thought you were getting at is as well is if we've got haircuts and cushions and so on salted here and there throughout this analysis, why don't we put them all on a sheet of paper so we can look at them and see what they add up to as a whole?
Yeah, I don't think we have too many. I think this is one of the few ones we have.
This is,
Like I just.
yeah, this is one of
That's fine, too.
the
We don't need to do that.
conscious ones
Yeah.
that we've
More of an
done.
ideological
And it's,
statement.
like in this case, it's worth 400 grand. And I think what Dan's point is, do we take away 20, 15, nothing, and bring the 400 back now, or?
That really takes the Board of Selectmen contingency to 575. It's the 400 here plus 175 in the contingency account. Is that a fair way of thinking about it?
That's what we collect. It doesn't get-
Dollars wise, yes,
Yeah.
but process wise, no.
No,
because
no, I know,
Yeah.
but
We're
I'm
not
just
It would
saying.
still
appropriating more
require a
dollars.
special
I know, I'm
appropriation.
just saying,
On average, over the last 5 years, we have collected 43 basis points more than we have budgeted, if you look at it.
that's my point.
The lowest year in terms of how much more have we collected than we budgeted was actually fiscal year '23. In that case, we collected 27 basis points more than we budgeted, right, with the 25 basis point discount. So what that sort of argues is that there is room to, I would not argue to eliminate the reduction from the 5-year average because we like to be conservative, but I would argue that there is room to consider, say, for example, only subtracting 20 basis points, or even, honestly, my vote would be at subtracting 15 basis points, because at 15 basis points, that still leaves you $240,000 of excess cushion from the collection methodology, and puts $80,000 back in favorably towards the budget.
Jen, can you remind us if there's one other variable floating behind the scenes here in terms of the actual grand list, the changes that occurred post October 2023?
So that is on here. We have the estimated levy, which is what we set the budget on. That's just a factor of grand list times collection rate, that kind of thing. But then there's the final levy. So what we thought we were going to have as a levy, what we actually had, and then there's a dollar and percent change. It hasn't changed that much from prior years. If we expanded the history, I think there was a year or two that there was a big change. But since fiscal 18 forward, the biggest swing we've had is a reduction of $116,000, which was
That was a settlement.
0.08%.
Was that a settlement?
That's 2017.
Was that 2017? Oh, or did you say what's 2017?
18.
2018.
No, line 19 says 2017 included a significant decrease in
Oh.
estimated final.
Duh.
Oh, Country Club.
I'm just trying to get to
Yeah, so
11
that was in
o'clock.
17,
I'm
not
just,
18
I'm trying
when
to
we had
say,
the
talk for another minute to get to 11 o'clock.
So there's
So
not
we break the
material-
all-time record.
So the growth in the grand list isn't really having any material impact on,
No, it's been pretty close to, we haven't had many additions or reductions after July 1st.
yeah. So, I mean, listen, all of these changes that we make, we should be as accurate as possible. But I think we should all internalize, that's a one-time change, and it doesn't affect spending.
Right.
So it's just,
Right.
it's us using up a little bit more fund balance or leaving less fund balance behind for next year.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
a 5 basis point increase this year means there's going to be 5 basis points less for next year of cash.
Of cash, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, makes
Right.
sense.
It's not worth these minutes.
Can't spend it twice.
Yep.
One question that I do have for you, for me to put the list together, you had mentioned when you reviewed Board of Ed the other night, there was a question of the Tokenique paving. Do you want to put that on the potential cut list?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Jim, could you also put on the 50,000?
Was that clear?
What was that?
You did mention from the revenue that we discussed adding 50,000.
The town
to
clerk.
Town clerk.
I already have that on
Yeah.
the list.
Yeah, okay.
I had that in my spreadsheet, but I
Yeah,
never
I
sent
had
it.
in mind also, I just wanted to make sure.
And that was just to bring it up to current year budget,
Yeah,
correct?
right.
So Jen, how do we, so from here to Tuesday, so how would you suggest, as we think about this over the course of the next few days, and we're all gonna have, should we centralize kind of recommendations through Jim, and then have Jim send you an email saying, hey, sensitize the model for these following, or how do you guys wanna manage that? Because I think what we're gonna wanna know prior to Tuesday, right, is what changes we're going to be, what are the range of changes that we ought to be discussing on Tuesday?
Yeah, so
So how
I kind
about,
of remember the last time we kind of had this, which was back in the COVID year, right, Jim? I think you maybe John, you did, too. You guys put together a chart, which was, okay, here are the five different options, not the only five, here are 5 different options, and the resulting impact on taxes and mill rate.
I think we could probably do a little bit of it feels like there's a lot of things that we're sort of sure of. And there are some other things where we're maybe not necessarily sure of, like Board of Ed operating yet, how much is gonna come off of that. So I think we could create a little bit of a matrix. Just hit pause for 1 second. One of these steps has always been whether we're gonna bond anything. Do we all agree that there's nothing in the current budget that we would propose bonding?
Agree.
Other than the fire, other than what's already been earmarked, right?
Are we sure we want to bond the fire truck?
Well, that's in the,
I
Yeah.
don't think there was anything large enough, if you want to
Yeah,
say,
no,
like,
there's nothing large enough to do it.
like usually we're bonding 1 to 4 million, like somewhere around that number,
Yeah.
and just doesn't feel like there's anything out there.
I agree.
no,
We don't need
No.
any more debt.
no, exactly. And we're bonding enough, right?
Yeah.
So the only thing it's $1 million for the tanker, right?
Yep.
Yes. That's it.
And so actually, we'll pull that out. It's no impact to the budget, total dollars or anything. I'll pull that out of both sides because that'll come to you when they're ready to bond and they go through the whole apparatus description and everything.
But it is an active decision we need to kind of make here. Do we want to bond this fire truck for 1 million? Or do we want to tax for it or use some of the few $1 million that we can probably take out of the general fund?
I would advocate, we've been bonding fire
Yeah.
apparatus for the last
Forever.
few years. So
Right.
I don't see any reason to pivot away from that. And
Agreed.
Oh, why we didn't buy with ARPA funds? Yeah. Oh, because of the timing, right?
We can pay cash later.
Well, I think when you look at other things kind of coming down, there are sewer projects, which are large. There are bridge repairs that I would put in this sort of small, like in medium. There are things like the retaining wall things
Their own
that.
heights?
What?
At their own heights?
Yeah.
But that's,
No, he's saying in the future.
Are there
Oh, in the
things that we
future,
don't
sorry,
want to
sorry.
bond,
Year,
but
but
we
Okay.
down
want
the
to
road,
use, we
in
want to
addition-
preserve a little bit of general fund balance
Yep,
for?
yep.
There's the security appropriation, right? And I think once that ultimately gets figured out, do we have thoughts on things like the retaining wall?
Well, we don't want to debate that tonight.
No,
yeah.
but I guess just in terms of, there's some contemplation of using more taxing for some of these things that we were otherwise bonding for. If we're all set on bonding for the fire truck and using general fund for some of these other larger, but not,
Too large.
so we're all in agreement around bonding?
Yeah, we're bonding $1 million for the tanker, period. Right.
Yeah.
So I think we do have a lot of known, and I think Dan used the term adjustments. Those are the known ones. I'll make sure that those are kind of denoted one way on the sheet. And then the ones that are, should we defer this? Should we, do these things? We'll get the patch estimate for the nature center. I won't have that tomorrow. What did you throw out there? Just 75 as a placeholder, maybe?
Yeah.
Yes, because it's not just the patching, it's the curb repair and some milling along the adjacent road.
So from what I've heard, I have the known ones that we've discussed that are adjustments that have come out of the reviews, the couple that were on the list of significant variances that came out of the projection. But the ones that are potentials, the Rock Foundation, maybe a reduction, the Cherry Lawn traffic study, the Nature Center driveway, Weed Beach Gatehouse, stand-on blower, the PD LPRs, we have to wait and see what Board of Selectmen does on those.
Unless there are objections, I would suggest that the rock embankment be reduced from 9,000 to 2,600 and the traffic study be deferred. So we can put those into the known,
Sure.
the known category.
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
That works.
I'm just talking capital right now.
Yes.
There's an unknown of Tokenique paving, an unknown of an adjustment to investment income.
The
and-
Tokenique paving, while we're on that, there is a curb repair that's going to, so that 310, if we defer it, won't go to zero, because I think that curb needs to be repaired. So that's something we'll have to get from Rich. But I can send him a note.
Isn't that something that we have to do at the same time? Like, repair the curb, you do that when you're actually.
Well,
doing
the
paving?
curb, no, the curb is in disrepair. I'm not sure,
Okay.
but Ed seemed to think you can do a curb repair and mill the road just abutting that portion of the curb without doing a complete, pavement job, repaving. You can do patching and curb repair.
We do that when we do sidewalks, we're
Yeah.
putting in curbs.
Yeah, we can repair a curb without repaving.
Is it in the circle?
Yes, it's in the circle.
Make sure you do, okay. So in terms of process, all of these changes, can we have it set up? Because I do think any changes we make to the Board of Selectmen budget, we're gonna need to kind of vote on those items in terms of passing that budget. Capital is really one budget, so it's not necessary, right? It's not necessarily Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen, it goes to them
Right,
as
it's
one
just a
capital
total.
budget. But maybe, I just think it's healthy to kind of set those votes up as any changes to the Board of Selectmen capital items and Board of Ed capital items, and we'll pass the whole budget.
And then, so they're in orange in your spreadsheet. They're not yet carried into the master's calculation.
Yeah, so what I was just thinking is, all of these potentials, there'll be a number on that cut list. They'll all flow into the master sheet, but then if we decide we're not gonna take that cut, we just knock it out of the cut list.
That'd be helpful. So you're gonna net.
We're gonna assume all of them are gonna be approved, and
Yeah,
then we
yeah,
can
so
pick
we
them
can
off.
see the effect of the ones
Yep.
we've already discussed.
And you'll have a revised general fund based off that 4.6 additional that we're looking at, right? Like that revenue, positive on expenditure, 4.6, it rolled down to like
Yeah,
35 million?
the
35?
projection, or the
Yeah.
fund balance tabs and stuff, that'll be in what goes out to you.
And
Just for the sake of, if we're gonna take possibly $1 million to $3.5 million out.
Yep.
And you'll set that up for, and the only thing that's gonna come out of the general fund between now and the end of the year is whatever, I think we plug in column B there,
Yep.
right? There might be a couple $100,000 that the Board of Ed needs to close out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that'll, that.
But, I mean, that's gonna be just a flop. Technically, you're gonna have to do a special appropriation, and it's gonna go in, but it's all gonna wash through, and we're still gonna end up with a 659, 4.6 overall. It's gonna come out of the general fund and go back in.
And with respect to the bonding, just to drill down on this, because we are issuing bans, we're pushing bans out for Great Island. What assumption do you have for the interest that's going to come due on the ban for the half of Great Island?
In 25,
Do you have the full interest rate, like?
Yes.
2-ish%?
yeah, it's actually assumed that it was higher than what Mark's pro forma was when we went over it when he was here.
Yeah.
And we did the resolution to sell, so I think that's gonna come down, and I think the debt service on the bonds is gonna come down a little bit.
Okay, but in terms of like, there's no use of premium to pay interest built into this model?
There's a small amount. At the time we put the budget together, I think, I can look, but I think it was around 150,000. So if we get more premium on the bands, we'll have more revenue to use in fiscal '25.
I mean, is that did the rating agencies have any comment on that, effectively capitalizing that interest
No, not at all.
for an item we already own?
No, not at all.
Okay. And what if the premium that we generate, I guess is, for a band, it's not gonna be more than the interest, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay.
So are you going to propose a series of potential cuts to the Board of Ed operating budget so that, and we could see, rather than all of us
Yes.
asking you to do that, you're gonna do that, and we're gonna see what the resulting total budget is, increases, mill rate calculation is, and average, because it's all built in already.
Yep.
But so
Yeah.
we could see what the ranges of those might look like.
Yeah, so what we'll show is, because it's just dollars, right? So I think we can show this is what a change in dollars spent, because operating, we're taxing for all our operating budgets. So we can say for instance, $1 million reduction equates to this much of a change in mill rate. If you all are in agreement, I think it's healthy to show this much of a change in taxes for the average taxpayer.
Yes.
Yes.
Average or median.
Very.
Very against using the median because that shows two different things, right? And then change versus last year. So maybe if we could have it, each budget outcome, if we could show my average taxpayer effect, year-over-year effect, and then mill rate effect. Those are the three, I think, right? We want to, yeah.
Would not the average be higher than the median?
Yes.
The median is actually, the median rose faster than the average. The average, basically, you guys, if you all look on the grand list,
The average is $1,700,000 and change.
I took what the average amount was, and I assume that's the average taxpayer, because that is the average residential amount. So, okay. Jen, any other questions from us?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Rob moves. John seconds. All those in favor? Paul, I assume you're in favor?
Yeah.
It's unanimous. We're stand adjourned. Thank
Get
you.
out of my chair.